Hello everybody, welcome into our latest live broadcast. It is the 11th of December, 2024. My name is CareyHolzman. Thanks you guys for tuning in. It's Wednesday and today we have another build that's been waiting in the wings for a while that I had been putting off to the point of forgetting it existed, and that is the other Z890 Ace board. Now we just prepped one that already went into the big case that was going to go to Mara, which has now been postponed because she'd rather have the Asus C890 board. But then there was another one. The idea was Mara and I would have matching computers, and this was back when these boards, these $600, $700 motherboards were on sale for $200. Normally I would never buy a board of this caliber, but the price was so low, I couldn't say, it felt like a crime if I didn't buy it. And we got a couple 14900Ks. Now these bad boys, they're still $433, I think is the cheapest price I found on Amazon. That's without a cooler. And I thought by now the price would have gone down below $400. If you want to get a 13900, prices are a little bit cheaper, and go down to a 12900 and the prices are significantly cheaper. They're all still being sold brand new, nothing wrong with them, just older inventory. And it appears that with the impossible to get Ultra 9s, they're just completely sold out. People are sticking with the 14900K. The regular non-K version of this chip is $50 more, sometimes even more than that, because it comes with that big laminar cooler. And that's easily a $50 cooler, which for the first time that I can recall makes the K the less desirable chip for value for the money. Now that being said, if you're going to get a chip like this, you're going to need a serious cooler. And if you're going to get a motherboard like this, you're going to need a serious case. And pair it together with a serious NVMe and a serious stick, set of RAM, and you're easily looking at a $2,000 computer just getting you rolling. That's without a graphics card. You're somewhere between, I would say, $1,300 and $1,900 plus sales tax and shipping if applicable. And as such, this is not for the light of heart. This isn't something where we would buy any one of these components and then pair it with anything lesser. Pairing this 14900K with a lesser board just doesn't make any sense. Pairing a 4 terabyte Western Digital Gen 4 with something that's only Gen 3 that really can't take advantage of it doesn't make any sense. We're obviously going to use DDR5 RAM, and I'll take the bad RAM from the other build that we tried on 2 different motherboards using the Z890 chipset, see if the RAM is still bad on a Z690 chipset, just to verify we've got bad RAM or just incompatible with the chipset. And then finally, I've got this massive EK-Nucleus all-in-one water block. This is a 360 millimeter cooler, and we're going to put all this into a massive case. It's a $200 case, and normally I would have no interest in this case. I guess there's a theme to this build. And that is, it's Corsair 2500D, which is about this wide. I don't like these big wide cases, and I started thinking, what am I going to put in there that's just not going to get dwarfed by that case? And then it all came to me, and I said, oh, this board is really big, that case is really big, this cooler's really big. All of that should fit together and look fantastic, as though we planned it all along. Now, we don't normally do this for a customer, in the sense that when we're building for a customer, you think of it like construction. We need a blueprint. We need to know where the room's going to go. How tall is the roof going to be? How big is the area of land we have to work on? And so when, if a customer were saying, well, let's just buy this now and we'll do this later, and oh, by the way, we're going to move this bedroom, and all of a sudden the whole support structure for the roof will no longer support. You got to go back to the city, you got to get re-permitting, you got to go through the whole process just to make one little change. So it's really important when we do work for customers that we get that blueprint right up front and understand what's our budget, what's our timeline, and what is the end result supposed to do or look like or accomplish. And then we work and we get it done and we move on to the next one. When we're doing stuff here for the channel, we have it's more like what many of the viewers do at home, which is you just buy parts willy-nilly as you see fit for whatever reasons you have. we have to justify to customers which parts we're buying or why we're putting it together the way we are, for which benefits, which potential downsides, what's the sacrifice, and what cost and what timeline. And the customer's got to agree with all that in order to establish what should be a very happy customer at the end, or at least an interest in the customer to give you their business. They have many places they can give your business to. So when you're doing stuff for yourself, you do whatever you want. You can work on your own timeline, you can pick and choose and change as you wish, you can return parts, swap them out. And so when we do these for the channel, we have that ability, which is a lot more similar to what you guys, most of the viewers, do at home. I did not know yesterday that I would be using this drive or this storage. I even completely forgot I had the board and the chip. This chip was specifically purchased to be used in this board, and they were both set aside, but no other components were selected for this build or set aside. So things like the cooler, the RAM, the power supply, they hadn't been decided until I looked at what I had already in inventory and said, do I have anything I can use? Because I also want to get rid of this inventory as much as possible. And sure enough, it all just kind of fit together, and it's been there the whole time staring me in the face. And I'm like, hey, you know what? This will be a great build. I have one other Z690 board from MSI called the Unify, and that was on sale for even a little bit less money. Still a $500 motherboard that was on sale for like 175 bucks or something. And it's a step below this one, but I don't have a CPU for it yet, and I'm not sure I'm ready to drop $433 plus sales tax, which will be about $485 for just another box. And then I'll have to figure out another case and another power supply and another cooler and other RAM, and it gets really, really expensive. So while this is fun to do once in a while, it is profoundly expensive. And if we have it going to a customer, then the customer's paying for it, and I don't care what it costs. I get paid just basically to build it. I don't sell the parts. So that being said, that's how we got to today's video. And it definitely has been waiting patiently for me to finally figure out what I'm going to do with it. And we still have the Z890 Asus ProArt Creator Wi-Fi to finish. We haven't even started the other Ultra 7 build. And we have quite a few other builds that were in process but haven't been completed. We're waiting on some parts. So we will revisit all of those, including yesterday's build, once those parts come in and we can get those finished up. So there's so many things going on here, multiple projects happening at the same time. Customer called me earlier and said, when I open Excel or any of my apps, they don't open. Well, this customer has 3 monitors and one's plugged in via USB. And about 3 years ago, they called me with the same problem, and through asking questions over the phone, customer has about 13 computers in an office. Most of them have 2 monitors. This one has a 3rd monitor, and they plug it in via USB. So once I figured that part out, which took a good 20 minutes, I said, well, unplug the USB monitor. Just, let's take this down to the basics. Unplug anything the computer has plugged in, printers, whatever, that we don't need to verify what's going on here. And once we did that, the applications would open properly. So what was happening is the apps were opening on the monitor that was plugged into USB but not turned on. He only uses this monitor occasionally. He'll use it for about 2 months out of the year, and then it just sits. And he's under the impression that if he turns it off, it should be disconnected, right? The system shouldn't see it. And I'm not saying he's wrong, but I don't know the make and model of the monitor. So the computer, from time to time and without any consistency, will start opening the whatever he's starting, Word, Excel, whatever, onto that 3rd powered off monitor, and he can't see it. All he knows is I'm clicking on it and nothing's happening. Well, something did happen. It opened on the monitor that's turned off. So about 3 years ago when we had this problem, I finally figured out why. I explained it to him, and problem's done, right? Well, about a year later, he calls me again with the same problem. And I said, okay, this is familiar. So clearly he's tried turning the monitor on, right? So maybe the monitor's dead now. Try unplugging the monitor. And then it worked. I say, plug the monitor back in. The monitor's working. Okay, so you completely forgot the discussion we had last year. We didn't have that discussion last year. Okay. The problem's not happening often enough for him to remember this. So I thought, well, now he'll remember it, right? This won't happen again. So this morning, you can guess what call I got. It's been about a year. Applications won't open. And I don't know which of the 12 computers he's on at this point. And we figure out we're right back to where we've been, right? It's always this third monitor. And I said, you either need to turn that monitor on and leave it on, or you need to unplug it from the USB port until you need it. Now, instead of saying, good to know, thank you, he instead wants to debate with me how that monitor is supposed to work. Well, it's only supposed to mirror monitor 1. It doesn't make any sense why it would act as a third separate monitor when I have it configured. I go, listen, we could talk about how it should work all you want, okay? I don't know why it's doing what it's doing. I don't know the brand or the make. I don't know that it's working the way it should, or that if you would buy a different monitor and plugged it into your USB, that you wouldn't have this problem, because it doesn't happen all the time. All I'm trying to tell you is if you want to avoid this problem in the future, keep the monitor unplugged from the USB port until you need it, or just leave the monitor on all the time and ignore it. Okay. And then I went to my notes for that customer, because I know I'm going to hear in about 8 to 12 more months about my apps aren't opening. And that's the tell. If this customer, this one customer out of all the customers I've ever had, calls me and says, when I click on my apps, they don't open, my notes to myself say, ask them if that third monitor is plugged in, and if it is, unplug it. It's a really simple thing. I found that so many consumers get themselves into trouble, and I share this information not to embarrass the consumer, but to educate everybody that it's not just them. Lots and lots of consumers make these mistakes, and if they weren't, I wouldn't be as busy as I get. That's what I do for a living. And what's common sense to me is not common sense to ordinary users, and that's typical. That's normal. There's nothing wrong or embarrassing about it. When we can share these experiences and we can help educate the consumer, then we reduce the likelihood of that consumer needing help from somebody else, especially if they're paying that person to do something they could have done themselves, like unplugging it and plugging it back in again, or in this case, leaving it unplugged. They're very simple things. And I share this story with you because I want you to always check the simple things if you choose to be self-reliant and to be able to resolve your own computer issues. There's a good chance the computer issues that you have as a home user are created by you. And the difference between us is I fix computer problems. That's what I do. I don't hear about the ones people are able to resolve by themselves. I only hear about the ones that people call and say, I have no idea what to do. You know, I need your help. And in a business, it's typically a different problem than it is for consumers. And if you watch my videos and you learn from my videos, there should be very little time that you should ask for help, because you should first, if you're so motivated to be self-reliant, follow the regular diagnostic steps I've demonstrated over and over and over the years. They're relatively simple, and most computers can be diagnosed within, if it's a repeatable problem, under 10 minutes, 8 minutes on average. Right? You just have power supply, motherboard, CPU, RAM, storage, video. I mean, that's pretty much it. And you isolate each one of those things to verify they work. Now, granted, you don't have all the spare parts that I have, but oftentimes the consumers are making changes they don't realize they're making. Or like in this particular instance, they're adding a USB monitor that they are assuming when they turn it off, it's the same as disconnecting it from USB, that the USB wouldn't detect it. I'm not saying that customers' impression of how that should work is inaccurate, but that's clearly not the way it's behaving. So your choice is replace the monitor, go for a different style of monitor that connects to the video card, get rid of the monitor, unplug the monitor from USB until you need it, if it's being used so infrequently. Because remember, this isn't happening very often. Once a year on average. And now it's just 3 years in a row we've had this issue, and I keep forgetting about what the symptom is, because the symptom is always I'm clicking on the app and then nothing happens, when in fact it is happening. It's happening on a monitor, it's turned off. So there you go, just a little tip from your Uncle Carey to keep you self-reliant as much as possible. Of course, we always enjoy interacting with you and your questions. And the first thing you should be asking yourself as a home user is, what could I have done to cause this? In most cases, that's going to lead you to your problem. And then the few remaining cases, you haven't done anything. It's just a piece of hardware is failing. But that happens so infrequently now. What should be assumed first is, how did I screw up? And this idea that I didn't do anything wrong, I didn't screw it up, that denial and that lack of accepting the possibility, it makes me a lot of money. So just so you know, it's just how it works. All right, let's say hello to everybody joining us in the chat, and let's see what we got here in the chat room. John from Edinburgh, Scotland says hello. Hey, there's Frankie B joining us, Eddie Casanova and Mark Baggett. Dustin Fuller, Scott, and Steve Mercur say hello. Welcome in, guys. Hello to Garfield Rupe, Jonathan, and Doman 2000, along with, of course, our friend Luke Greenia and our friend Mark Gaines. Mara's there in the chat room, as always. And she's, looks like she's changed our badges again. She's working on the video notes for today and the thumbnail, so expect those to be updated throughout the show. There's our friend Buster. Buster joins us from Edinburgh as well. Been a member for 31 months. He says, good evening, Carey and Mara and everyone in the chat. All the best from Bonnie, Scotland, where the temperature in Edinburgh is dropping. It is now 28 degrees Fahrenheit or 2.2 degrees Celsius. Brr. I love the cold, though. That might even be a little cold for me. I don't know. Stay warm, Buster. And thank you for renewing your membership. Claudio says hello from Portugal. Marsman50 saying hello. Yeah, from Wisconsin. And Buster with a 10-pound super chat as well. Thank you so much, Buster. Charlie Purdy says hello, along with Craig Dowler and Kurt Schlegel. We also see Paul Howe joining us, and John Lewis from Brazil says hello. Dan Nilsson joining us from Sweden. Trying to remember that. 3D Everything renews membership now, also a member for 31 months. You guys rock. He says, hello, everyone. It's been 2 years, 7 months, and 0 days membership now, according to YouTube. Well, we appreciate you. We're so glad that you've been there pretty much since day one. I think the 31 is it. I don't think we had memberships 32 months ago. So it really means a lot to us that you guys have been there since the beginning and continue to be there today. We can't thank you enough for that. Paul O'Brien joins us and says hello from Ireland. And let's see if I missed anybody. Andy Winbridge says hello from the Netherlands. Gil Garcia joins us and says hello. Dave Batt says hello, as well as Terry. Our friend Rick Lakes out there in Minnesota, speaking of the cold. Well, I guess it was good enough for Prince. All that money Prince had, and he just wanted to stay in Minnesota. Prince felt that the colder the weather was, the more likely the criminals wouldn't be out doing bad things because it's too cold outside and they're generally lazy people. So he honestly felt that it was safer to live where it's colder. You know what? He might be right. Let's see. JD52WTF says, I love the Carey stories where his customers are inept. No, they're not inept. That's not fair. Nobody's born knowing this stuff. You know, when I was born, I couldn't even speak English or know how to use a bathroom. So I've come a long way since then. Not everybody cares. Some people use a computer in their line of work. Doctors and lawyers are very common for this, where you can try and teach them, here's how you can call me less. They're not interested. You just do your job and I'll keep paying you. I'm okay with paying you because I don't want to learn it. I've got all this legal stuff to learn and I've got all this doctor stuff to learn. I don't have room in my brain or the time in my desire in my soul to have any interest in the technology whatsoever. I absolutely don't want to know it, and I am more than happy to pay you to do it. Please do not teach me how. When I call you with a problem, please come out as soon as you can and resolve my problem and send me a bill and I will pay you. So you have to understand that what I offer for businesses is the ability for them to focus on what their skill is. Their skill may be accounting. Their skill may be as a dentist, a doctor, a chiropractor. They could be a real estate agent. It has nothing to do with computers. They have no interest in it whatsoever, other than I need to look up the MLS listings to see what homes are available, or I need to fill out the loan paperwork or the credit paperwork to do the earnest money transfer. It is a tool of business. And outside of business, they don't want to play with their tools. Those are just tool-related business items that are only utilized when in business. So I come in and I say, look, I'll take care of the tools. I'll make sure you're backed up. I'll make sure you have antivirus, your firewalls are up, and that your computers are cleaned and updated and maintained at all times, so we can reduce the likelihood that a computer goes down or part of your infrastructure goes down, which essentially takes you out of business until that system comes back up. And if they can't complete the sale of whatever it is, $1 million house, they're potentially losing upwards of around $70,000. So to pay me a couple $100 to come out and fix it is nothing compared to what they're potentially losing. And they don't necessarily want the added stress of, here, take this on too. You fix your own stuff so you don't have to rely on me. To them, the common attitude is, I have no issue paying you. I like you, and I like that I don't have to worry myself about this, so I can focus on what I do. Now, if they ask me to do what they do, hey, you want to complete the sale of this house? I don't know how to do that. Well, why don't you learn it? Because I'm never going to do that in my life. I'd rather just pay you. So I understand exactly where they're coming from. And that doesn't mean they're inept or they're dumb. Far from it. Many of these clients are far smarter than I ever have been or ever will be. They just don't have any desire or interest in this. So let's be clear on that. The reason I tell the stories is to let you know, one, you may find yourself relating to these stories. Oh, that's happened to me too. Or two, hey, I'm thinking about being a tech, but I'm not quite sure what kind of jobs I would have to do. Well, these are just examples, and that's the only reason I share them. Overall, it's to contribute to the community in a positive way for setting expectations and encouraging self-reliance. So for those of you that applies to, you're welcome. And for those of you who don't have any interest in that, you might be at the wrong channel. But that being said, it is absolutely these customers that enable me to have a career, and so to insult them in any way would defeat the whole point of it's basically career suicide if I were to, provoke. It would be like being a chef. A lot of people know how to cook and they can feed themselves. They're just not in the mood. They don't want to. It's messy. I don't have time. Right? So you go, the chef doesn't go, oh, these people don't know how to cook a dinner. They do. Or they could look up a recipe. They just don't want to. So you say, thank you for your business, and there you go. We all utilize services. Whoever you've hired to fix your plumbing or fix your car, you've hired somebody at some point to fix something. So I guess in your mind, that makes you inept at whatever that was. It's just, you can't do everything yourself. And if you do, sometimes it'll cost you 3 times more and take 3 times longer. All right, let's keep going here. Eugene Hidalgo joins us and says hello. And Chris Garrett says hello. There's Ghetto Fortnite joining us, along with Barry Klein. Hey, Barry, good to see you. Shamim Kajvirez and Brian Rhodes say hello. There's Phil Stodd. Hey, Phil. Vasos says hello. All right. So, guys, welcome in again, and let's just get started with this because, we have a lot of work to do here. Now, all of these parts are brand new. This has never been opened, I think. Oh, I guess I've opened this. This has never been opened. All the tape is still sealed. This still has shrink wrap on it. This still has shrink wrap on it. And this has never been opened. So I guess I've opened this for some reason. This is my backup RAM because I honestly don't think that RAM is going to work. That's 96 gigs of RAM. This is 32 gigs. This is RGB, that's not RGB. On this build, I want RGB because we're going to go in that big Corsair 2500D case. It was on sale for half off. It was $100. Normally, I wouldn't buy that case. I normally wouldn't buy this motherboard, but they were so inexpensive, I couldn't say no. EKWB is long in trouble financially, so I think they made great all-in-one coolers. This has nothing to do with the quality of their components. This has to do with them not being financially responsible by paying their employees and their vendors and their holding up their end of deals they made, business deals. So as consumers, if you still see their products available, they're good, solid products. You may not have a warranty. There may be no company to send it to, but these were great coolers, and no reason, especially if you see one on sale, if they're blowing them out, they're a great deal. Mark Gaines with a 10-pound super chat says, Carey, I plugged in my Project Zero build into the internet, and it's a lot faster. I hope you enjoy the Amazon gift card I sent you earlier, and thanks for all the great content. Well, right on, Mark. Thanks for the update. Let's check the email as soon as I find my glasses. And we'll start with that before we get the unboxing. It occurs to me that sometimes we get some contributions prior to the show starting, and then I often won't get to it till the end of the show. But let's change that right now. Under my email here somewhere. Fred Vandermeulen with a $5 super chat says, hi, here's a little one. I just want to say I've learned a lot from you over the last 6 years. Right on. Well, thank you, Fred. We appreciate any and all contributions. And trust me, they all add up. Our friend Frankie B with a PayPal contribution. Frankie, you rock, man. Thank you so, so much. Paul Gray from Australia with another Amazon gift card. Thank you so much for your continued generosity. Paul joining us from Australia. And yesterday, Charlie Purdy with an Amazon gift card. It was very, very kind of him to say. All of these are extreme kindness, along with Paul Gray again from Australia. And I'm looking for something from Mark Gaines. He said it was earlier. I'm wondering if that was yesterday, because we did receive a contribution. It's in here. I'll find it. Of course, our friend Buster had also sent us a contribution on Monday. And, our friend William Denton on Monday, Paul Gray again on Monday, every day this week from Paul Gray there in Australia. Why am I not finding Mark Gaines? I know he's in there because I remember reading it. Yesterday, Mark Gaines sent $61.03. If that's the one you're referring to, if not, let me know. And of course, thank you guys so, so much. Because of you, we're able to do builds like this where there's no sponsor involved in anything. Everything you see on the screen has been purchased. And I'm not exactly sure what we're going to do with it when we're done. My hope is I can either use it here in the studio or studio-related activity, or it can be sold locally. It's so big and heavy that shipping it would be impractical and expensive. And then supporting things when they're hundreds or thousands of miles away is practically impossible. And that leads to a bad customer experience and a lot of unnecessary anxiety with shipping. You know, is it going to get there on time? Is it going to arrive damaged? Is everything going to be okay? So we do try to sell some of this, most of the stuff locally, unless see, that's the downside. When companies send us things for free, generally we're not allowed to sell that stuff. And I see content creators do that. I've seen content creators who I otherwise think are excellent content creators have like a website where they sell all the stuff they got for free. That's between them and the company. That's not my business, but I don't do that because most of the packages are marked not for retail sale. As a result, then we have to figure out something else to do with it. And we have all kinds of projects that we can revisit and pull some of these older, mini PCs, for example, that we've been sent for review, can still live on with other projects in the future, like demonstrating networking or We've got a video coming up demonstrating how to download and install Office using SCD keys and the discount and how all that works. And we'll use a mini PC for that demonstration. Whenever we have a Chronoson, we'll always grab a mini PC to use for that demo. So it's always great to have a PC around that's very small, easy to grab, plug it in, and use it for demonstrations, and not have to worry about, you know, any hidden private data on it being accidentally exposed. You know, they're nice, clean builds that are fast and ready to rock and roll and demonstrate just how capable they are, just to emphasize that beyond the review. Outside of the review, look, we're using it, and watch how fast it responds. So we have that purpose, but there's a balance in there somewhere, which I have not yet found, but continue to strive for. But in the meantime, the content must continue. So as long as we have the funding that we can continue doing it, the part of what do we do with it when it's done, well, sometimes these problems tend to solve themselves over time, and other times, well, they sit here for quite some time. But that is, I suppose, the only downside. Now, with that, again, I thank all of you, all my friends in green, all the members, everybody joining us. Thank you for hanging out in our chat. If you're watching the video live, I hope you'll join us in the chat room, because 50% of the enjoyment of the video is the interaction in the chat room. And all you have to do is pop into the chat, say hi, hello. That's it. Just pop in there and say hello. We'd love to see you. If you're in there watching, we don't know you're in there until you speak up. You're hidden otherwise. Speaking of which, Andrew Charlesworth says hi. Welcome in, Andrew. And Leslie Cavan says hello. Welcome in, Leslie. Good to see you again. Planet Cryos joins us. Renews membership, now a member for 31 months as well. It's 31 month day, I think. That's pretty cool. And he contributes $2 and says, hi, hello. Exactly the way I said it. Hello there. Hi, hello. Welcome in, Planet Cryos. Philip Jones says hello. Now this is the same board we built prior. If you've been watching the channel for a while, you might think, is this a repeat? No, it's a second build. Because these boards were $200 a piece, I wouldn't spend $600 retail price for these. I could have bought 3 of them, but I basically buy one, get 2 free, right? But I just bought 2 because I said, okay, 1 at that price is a good deal, but 2 at that price is a great deal. 3 at that price, I'm going to go broke buying the RAM and storage and case and power supply. So I limited myself to 2. And I'm glad I did, because about a week later, the Z690 MSI Unify went on sale for even less. All right, we'll pick up a Unify. And that still sits brand new in a box, and who knows what we'll do with it yet. But that price was just too good to say no to. Now, granted, we're on Z890 now, right? So that means before that, there was the Z790, and before that, the Z690. Well, that's why this was discounted. And also, when I bought this, Z890 didn't come out yet, so it was only 1 generation behind. This will be good for 11 generations worth before it needs to be replaced, maybe even 12. This won't need to be replaced until the year 2032. No, I take that back. It's 2024. At least 2035 minimum. When we build this, if we leave it alone with this level of tech in it, yeah, this would be a rock solid build for, I'd say 10 to 12 years. So I'm going to cut it right down the middle and call it 11. And let's say 2035 is when this will be outliving its usefulness. Unless something changes, if everybody gets into quantum computing, or I don't know. Maybe there's a actual purpose to have an NPU AI processor built into your CPU. They're promoting the heck out of that, but they also promoted the heck out of VR. They promoted the heck out of Y2K. They promoted the heck out of a bunch of stuff that never ever really took hold or resolved anything. Is this another one of those when it comes to AI and NPUs, or will it actually become something? You know, Apple had you believing a $3,500 headset was worth every penny, and now they don't even make it anymore. So it's a Microsoft Zune situation or an Apple Lisa. Not every product that comes out is successful. They're really pushing the AI in a marketing stance, but I don't see any practical use for it myself. So we won't miss that on here. So unless that changes, this should be rock solid till 2035 before it'll feel like it's a bit long in the tooth and needs to be replaced. If we buy the cheapest thing today, you know, we could go get a mini PC for 160 bucks. It'll last you about 2 years. On average, I would say for every $100 you spend on your computer, you add 1 year. So a $100 computer, on average, these are just averages, $100 computer should last you about a year before it becomes an issue. I can't tell you what the issue is, but it no longer is functioning or is capable of doing what you want it to do, whether it's too slow or it's failed. $200, 2 years, $1,200, 11, 12 years. Yeah, that's pretty much the market overall. There's always exceptions, and that's a very bold sort of blanket statement, but I've been in the business long enough to tell you that that's pretty much how it works out, or at least that's how it's been working out since 2010. Now, prior to 2010, technology was advancing much, much faster, and it's all started to slow down, and we're reaching a point of diminishing returns where the software isn't being as demanding as the hardware is advancing. So computers that were built 10 years ago still work great today. That's why there's a big outcry about Windows 10, you know, end of life, but another discussion for another day. Now, we are very fortunate to be in a position that we can do stuff like this, because as a business owner, I justified buying a very expensive computer for my business as a tax write-off. And it was a Core i7-965 CPU that cost $999 plus tax, just for the chip, okay, which is a fraction of an i5 today in speed and performance. And I told myself, if I'm going to buy this $1,000 chip, plus I have to buy the board and the RAM and the storage and the case and the power supply, I need that to last, because I don't have the kind of money to do that every year, not unless my business suddenly took off and became super successful. So believe me, I appreciate when people go, you know, that's too rich for my blood. But if you calculate what you've been spending on your computer, if you've just been buying pieces and putting things together and there's a sale here and a sale there, if you're like me, you probably found out you spent over $1,200 in the last five years, where a $1,200 computer would have doubled the value of your money by lasting up to 10. But then that might also get boring, just having the same computer every day that you never have to work on. So these are all things to measure, but I have found that that Core i7 965 chip that I bought, never had a problem. It was rock solid fast, and I ended up selling it after it was about 13 years old to a gentleman who really wanted it. And what he's doing with it, I don't know, but that's not even a 64-bit processor. Well, I think it's a 64-bit processor. It was triple channel RAM, but no NVMe. These are the days before NVMe. So I was like, you can have it, get it out of here. There's nothing wrong with it. It just wasn't as capable as a modern machine. So this will be in the same position, right? In that period of time, there'll be some other technology that this doesn't have and cannot be upgraded to. That you may realize that, you know, time to let this go. But if you're buying a $200 machine, that day will be sooner. That's all. Okay, so I think I got all the plastic peeled off of here. This is our MSI Z890 Ace. You want to see some expensive motherboards, MSI always has their, you know, whether it's a 790 or an 890, they will always have their high-end, Asus does this too, board for the high-end Intel chips, and they'll run over $1,000 for the motherboard today. So if you look up the MSI Godlike boards or their high-end boards, same with Asus, on a regular consumer Intel chip, you can drop over $1,000 just on a board, but it'll have a ton of I/O on it. I mean, this board has a little of everything from all the different USB ports and Thunderbolt ports. It's loaded to the gills, so you're not just paying more for a logo, for a fancy Dragon. You're paying more for bigger heat sinks and better voltage regulator modules that are more stable for overclocking. You've got this additional metal armor back here to protect the back of the board from ever hitting the back of the case. Not that that's ever been a problem. It doesn't hurt anything to have it. It just costs more money for that. And, you know, you've got all the fancy covering over the motherboard for aesthetic purposes and protective purposes. And so all of this costs money on top of higher quality materials and more I/O. This thing, I think, has 5 M.2 drives. Now, this is before the days of Gen 5 M.2. I think it has Gen 5 PCIe, but I believe all of our M.2s are Gen 4 on this, and that's why I've selected a 4 terabyte Western Digital SN850X, which is one of the fastest and best values for the money, in my opinion, for a 4 terabyte Gen 4 drive. That 8 terabyte Western Digital drive I told you was a great price at $549. Today it's $750. I was hoping it would drop to $499, but I'm keeping an eye on it, because at $549 for an 8 terabyte drive, after sales tax, that's going to set me back over $600. You know, for $600, I can buy a laptop. In fact, I did, and it's going to arrive tomorrow. So hopefully we'll have a Snapdragon review of a Galaxy Book 4 Edge. Not a cheap laptop, but you think about that. 1 8 terabyte storage or 1 entire laptop. If they're the same price, which one would you rather have? Now granted, that's 4 terabyte of Gen 4. 4 terabyte of Gen 3, I'm sure would be cheaper. Okay. Where to start? I think the CPU is just the easiest thing to get out of the way. So this is a brand new Intel Core i9 14th Gen 14900K. It's my last one, and I even forgot I had it. It was sitting on top of this box over in a corner going, excuse me, when do I get my turn? Excuse me, sir. I would walk by it. Pardon me, sir. Would I be just... And then finally I noticed it today, and I said, oh, this poor guy's just been like, you know, little Oliver. Thank you, sir. May I have another? Very humble, high-end computer. Okay. I've always been on the fence about whether or not to save these little enclosures. I don't do anything with them. They sit in a pile. And on the new Ultra 9 processors, you just get a piece of plastic covering it. It's like a almost cardboardish plastic. It has no special design. It just looks like packing material. Whereas this looks like a die. What a die is when AMD or Intel or NVIDIA or whoever makes their CPUs, it starts as one of these little squares. Now this is a little die. The dies that they typically print on, I've got the wrong screen, hold on a minute, can be about, you know, yay big, pretty large dies. And what happens is, and by the way, if you're interested in this, there's some great YouTube videos that show the process. Now that I've got the right screen, let me walk back over to the camera here. So what happens is this die is very thin. It's like a record. And it cannot have any imperfections whatsoever. It has to not have a microscopic speck of nothing, or that wherever that little speck of smudge or dust or debris, that ruins that little chip. Now each one of those little chips, each one of these little squares could represent a $900 processor, or in this case a $460 CPU, right? And you'll see it prints right to the edge. Well, these ones that aren't quite all there, those just get cut out. Now some of these are going to fail testing, and those will get thrown away or recycled. And you can imagine the bigger the die is, the more CPUs you get, right? So the smaller the die, the lithography process is pretty interesting. And it, when they talk about nodes, they talk about how fine the etching can be on these. And you need a microscope to see it. Like a human being couldn't do this. This is something that can only be done by a machine. There's no way a human could ever do this. It's not within our capabilities as human beings, but we can design machines that do this, and it's absolutely incredible how it works. So this big circular disc, which again is not this thick, this is just intended to represent the factory dies that come out of the foundries. They have to be precision cut because you don't want to cut through one of these. They cost a lot of money to make one of these. One die is probably worth around $10,000 or more, and it probably costs a good chunk of that just to get it made. So obviously the more of them you can make, the more of them you can sell, the more profit there is in it. And then if you have a bad batch, that means the whole die is bad. That means your yield gets thrown off and your expenses go way, way up. And then the people are like, where's the product? Well, sorry, you know, we're only getting 3 good ones out of a batch because they haven't perfected the process yet. When they keep reducing the size of the node, it keeps getting finer and finer. And now instead of 1 million transistors, now you've got 1 billion. Instead of 1 billion, you've got 2.5 billion. As we add that complexity, things don't have as much tolerance for passing or failing. And sometimes a chip is decided if it's a 14900 or a 14700 or 14900K based on how it comes off the die. So it's not like this is a die of all Core i7s. These could be Core i9s or Core i7s depending on how they pass tests. And if there's certain areas that are bad, they just mark those areas as bad and say, well, that's not used on an i7 anyway, so that'll be an i7 chip. So you might be buying flawed products. If you think about it, that's how it works. That's how they keep the prices down, and that's the whole secret. And what they've done here is they've been inspired in the packaging by, you know, giving it this cool look. Now, if I could get a die to have on display, that'd be really neat, but it would, like I say, probably cost me about $10,000 for an actual die. Now, if I can get one, they were thrown away, but of course they don't just chuck them in the trash, so dumpster divers can go and get them. We open that up, and inside, of course, that's our chip. So it's a really neat package. If you know what it means and what it stands for, it's a neat little decor. Other than that, it's just e-waste, right? It's just more, well, I don't know that it's e-waste, but it's waste. I think they're pretty cool. I just don't know what to do with them. All right, so that goes there. And we'll just put this back in as a, you know, it's a lot of packaging just for that one little chip that isn't even fragile to begin with. It's not like it needs to be protected. It's pretty solid state. You could probably throw it off a roof of a building and it'd be fine, probably. I always have difficulty figuring out how these go back on. And then there's a little envelope here with our documentation and a Go Faster sticker, as always. That'll go in the motherboard box when we're done. And then this is a little tricky to close. To say the least. If we bring it up here, like that, and then close it this way. You see, because the cardboard just pops out of there. We'll go down this way, like that. Maybe try and seat it in there once it's closed, it'll be easier. I'd be kind of interested to see how they do the factory without any tape holding anything in place. It's really hard to get that centered back into its little holder. But then you'll tell somebody how much you paid for it 10 years from now. You paid that much for that? My i3 goes faster than that 10 years from now. All right, we're going to open this and open this little lid up here. And that opens and exposes our CPU socket right there. This is socket 1700. So socket 1700 is generation 12, 13, and 14 Intel. So any Intel chip that starts with the number 12, starts with the number 13, or starts with the number 14 requires a socket 1700 in order for it to fit properly. The Ultra series are a socket 1851. They look very similar, but they're a little bit taller, and they will not fit into these sockets, nor will these fit into the other sockets. They're a different number of little landings down here. The number represents the number of pins or the number of landings. And each one of those can transfer data. So the more of those pins we're adding, the more data we can transfer, meaning if Gen 5 transfers data twice as fast as Gen 4, it likely needs twice the channels to do it. So that means in order to have more channels, it needs more of its own little dedicated connections. And if we want to add 6 hard drives and 4 NVMe drives, you better make sure you've got a big Threadripper chip. You've seen how many connections it's got on the bottom? That's because that's all, a lot of that's representing just your input-output. Each one of those is a way for data to flow in and of itself, while other pins are also doing data flow, so that you can have this massive amount of I/O on one of these big server-style chips. But in order to do that, you've got to have the lanes for the traffic to independently flow on. If they share a lane, obviously it's going to affect your performance. So with my glasses, which I left over here, we'll get our CPU seated here right quick. This is a pretty easy process. It makes a lot of people nervous because of how much money it is. But it's like playing a piano. You know, you play a piano for first time, it's going to sound horrible and you might be a little nervous about how to hit the keys. After a while, you'll start gaining confidence and your speed will go up. You can catch and decide your rhythm a lot easier, because just hitting the keys in the right order isn't enough for the music to sound good. You've got to play them at the right rhythm. So you hit the right keys at the right rhythm, at the right time. You hold the keys down or let them up according to what the music calls for. And over time, you'll be able to do that blindfolded. So I understand when people do this for the first time, it's good to be a little bit nervous. You shouldn't be haphazard about it. The pins under here are quite delicate. What I try and do is, I know the writing is all going to go from the top down on an ATX, micro ATX, or even EATX board. And I try to just, hold on to the edges of it. Don't touch the top or bottom if you can avoid it. And just gently set it up against one of the edges of the frame. And then let it go and let it gently fall. Now, when it does that, it should just seat itself. If it doesn't, if one end is still kind of hanging up, you can grab the edge of the heat spreader here and just give it a little wiggle or nudge until it seats down. Now, it is sitting just over those little pins. They're not touching yet. They are maybe a human hair away from touching. So it doesn't take much downforce to potentially, take the CPU out, let's say, on an angle and bend those pins, and then you've damaged your motherboard. And that's not a warranty issue that you broke it. So you want to lift straight up and straight down. And if you can't, like in my case, if I'm going in on an angle, I'm going to the plastic edge, not getting it anywhere near the pins. I bring it down very gently towards those pins, and then just let it fall a little bit, because I can't, my fingers are not tweezers, so I can't bring it fully down without my fingers getting in the way. But I bring it down as far as I can. So one side is down, the other side is still a little bit raised. Let that other side drop a little bit. Hopefully I got it in the socket. If I didn't, I just gently grab the heat spreader and nudge it into place, and it should sink down. No downforce is ever used. That's what the lid is for. So this lid is going to push down on top of the CPU. And it doesn't just push down on it randomly. There is a designated amount of force. Think of like a torque wrench. If you're rebuilding an engine and you're putting the heads back onto an engine block, the heads, the bolts that hold the head on, they have to be completely airtight, or you will lose your compression in your cylinder. Your car won't have power. You could mix oil and antifreeze together and destroy the whole engine. It is of utmost critical urgency that if you're going to do that kind of work, that you will tighten the bolts in the right order at the right torque specifications. That's it. There's no guessing. There's no good enough. It only works if it's done right. Well, in much the same way, the amount of pressure applied to the top of the CPU is dictated by this socket. It's not as simple as, if you didn't understand what's happening here, this socket has to be tested and meet the requirements of the amount of downforce. It cannot be too little and it cannot be too much. And if it is not exactly right, you're going to have a chip that doesn't make a connection with all those pins under there. You're going to have all kinds of weird problems. That's why we talk about warpage, and we talk about things that often happen through overheating and overclocking that damage the chip, and then people blame the company on their own, behaviors of going outside of the engineering specifications. You could certainly do that, but you will also open the door to potential consequences the rest of us won't suffer from. So just be prepared for the decisions that you make and what to expect. But with that lid closed there, the next thing we want to do, I'll go ahead and pull this plastic cover off, because that is there to protect those little pins. And of course, if we ever have to send this board back for warranty, we have to remove everything, RAM, CPU, all that has to come off. NVMe drive. If you send your board in for repair to any manufacturer and you leave your CPU or RAM or NVMe in it, you will not get them back. They have a big disclaimer, and they will tell you upon return material authorization processes that you are to send the board back bare the way we sold it to you, and you must put this cover back on. Otherwise, your warranty is void without this cover, and anything you left on the board we're keeping. Because they don't have the capacity to set your stuff aside. They've got hundreds of products coming and going into their factories every day. You are one of a countless sea of people and packages arriving in and out of their factory every day. It is unreasonable and kind of selfish and thoughtless for you to think you're the only one they're dealing with. Okay, so they wouldn't know. With all the employees all handling shipping and receiving in different departments, make sure that John gets his CPU back, and then they'll tell that person and they'll tell that person as it goes through the process. No, you're never going to get it back. And it's not because they want it, and it's not because they're being difficult. It's because they don't have the ability to do that in a cost-effective way. It would be cheaper for them to buy you a new CPU. So that's why you can hold on to this, and that's why you always make sure whenever you return a product, you always return it exactly the way you got it. All right, now we can close this lever down. And it has quite a bit of resistance because it's putting a lot of pressure down on top of that CPU, as we previously talked about. And that's what establishes 1,700 little delicate pins, making sure that they each have their connection to each of those individual 1,700 little landings or dots at the bottom of that CPU. It's pretty complex stuff, and it's amazing they've made it so simple when you think about how big would that wiring connector be if it had 1,700 wires on it and you had to plug it into another one. You want to talk about a nightmare wiring harness. That's effectively what that is without any of the wires. Color me impressed. There's Richard Claiborne with a $2 super chat. Good to see you, Richard. And who else do we have here? Chassified says, great tip. I always try and go straight down. You just want to be gentle, yeah, and you don't want to apply any downforce. That's the important. So when you go on an angle, you might accidentally apply downforce down at the bottom, and all you got to do is just bump the pins and they will bend. They're very, very fragile. They're not designed to take that kind of a hit. So straight down is always good and gentle, but I don't think you need to be super nervous about it. But I understand if you've never done it before. Caution is advised, but sometimes too much caution can cause damage, can make it worse. You're shaking, and then you make contact with those pins, and the pins just go in a second. You've just ruined the whole socket because you were too nervous. But again, as long as you just try and aim for the plastic edge of the socket and make contact with the edge of the CPU, and then just gently lower it down and let go, that's the method I use. And of course, the more you do it, the better you'll get. It isn't that big of a deal. Don't overthink it. Ron Hillier joins us and says hello. Welcome in, Ron. Okay, so the next thing I want to do, I guess, is put our NVMe drive in. We're going to put it in up here. Let's get that out of the way because that's easy. Again, no wires or cables are required. It gets power and data transfer right through the connector. I love the future. Classified in California with a $20 super chat says, thank you, Uncle Carey, for all your awesome videos. They've helped me out a lot over the years. I come to your channel as a student most of the time, and I appreciate you, sir, and this awesome community. Love from Canada. Well, right on. Well, thank you, Classified. Thank you for your support, and your generosity, and your kindness, and thank you for being a part of this amazing community we have here because, well, if you don't believe me, not you, but other people watching, you need to come in here and see it for yourself. We have the kindest, most welcoming community you'll find in any online community here online, any YouTube channel for sure. The bottom of this heatsink has some film covering the thermal tape, but it also has film on the bottom side because some NVMe drives have chips on both sides. So when we pull out this NVMe drive as a 4 terabyte chip, it's probably got chips on both sides of the circuit board. But smaller capacity chips mainly have, or smaller capacity drives rather, mainly have chips on the top and just bare on the bottom. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to see if it's got any parts on the bottom of it. If it has parts on the bottom of it, you take this film off, and that way it'll help cool those parts too. But if it's just a bare circuit board on the bottom of your drive, you could leave this on, it won't hurt anything. It's always a safe bet to take it off whether you need it or not, but the reason why it's here and what it does, I think is important to understand rather than ritualize a process without understanding why you're doing it. Now this does have the little swivel, the little swiveling latch, so we don't need any screws to attach the drive here, which I've always welcome to see. And then we will take this out of here. Now, if you bought an SSD that already has a heatsink on it, I would advise you not to use it if your motherboard came with a heatsink. Your motherboard's heatsink is always superior in every way, in cooling and in looks, aesthetics, to anything that comes with a standard SSD that came with a cooler. Where you want an SSD already attached from the manufacturer to your NVMe drive is if you have an open M.2 on your motherboard that has no heatsink. Now, if you want to, you could leave the attractive, more effective motherboard heatsink off because you have a heatsink already on your NVMe and you don't want to return it, or it's too late for you to return it. It's just not going to look as good, and it will run hotter. So if you can have it look better and run cooler, you could save money by not getting the version of the NVMe that, because you're paying extra for the heatsink. You don't need two. Use one or the other. My preference is to use the one that came with the motherboard for both looks and effectiveness of cooling. I've never seen an exception to that rule. I've never seen a motherboard heatsink that was equal to or less than the manufacturer's heatsink. They're always better and they always look better. But we have a couple of motherboards that have, they're not expensive. The cheaper the motherboard is, the more likely it didn't come with heatsinks. In that case, buying an NVMe with a heatsink makes sense. Now the thermal tape goes quite a ways back for supporting up to 110 millimeter SSD, but I think we've only seen one of those. They're not very common. It's usually 2280 or 22 millimeters wide, 80 millimeters long is a typical NVMe, and that's where this little standoff with the little spinning lock, so I don't have to use a screwdriver or a screw, holds us in position. But this can be moved. You can remove it all together, or you can move it up if your NVMe drive is shorter. The shorter ones generally don't have the speed or capacity. They also are generally not price effective, cost effective, because they don't make as many of them. So there's a scale. The scale of how much product they're making reduces their overall cost per unit, which means the 2280s are often less expensive to make and therefore less expensive to sell, and therefore the most common that you would likely have at home. So that's pretty much all we use on the channel. Every once in a while we may have cause to use a shorter or longer one, but it's pretty rare. We'll usually lose performance and financially not have as much value. So why would we do that? But that is the NVMe drive installed, our CPU, and now we can just put our little cover back on here. It always is a little confusing to me to remember which way this goes on, if it's this way or is it this way. There does appear to be a little groove cut out here, but it looks like it goes right over that groove there. There's also a little triangle here that I wasn't really paying attention to until now. That's probably there to indicate an up or down. Sometimes if these have writing on them, they'll go so the writing is in the same direction as our CPU. Like here it says Meg, and the writing faces from the top down. The CPU is in the same orientation, and any writing that would flow, typically on all motherboards, will always flow top down. So if it had writing on it, then that would also indicate the direction in which it goes back on. It's not rocket science. If you put it on backwards, it's just not going to line up. It would be nice to have a guide, and I kind of consider that little notch to be my guide. So I appreciate that little notch. Also, the screws we took out, one is shorter than the other one, lengthwise. And I remember the shorter one came out of the side closest to the RAM here. And that will matter because, well, the short one may not reach or may not go in very far. The other one, if you get them backwards, may not go in at all. So you will figure it out. But if you could get it right the first time, it's a lot more satisfying. See, I'm having a little difficult time here getting this lined up. I would prefer some kind of a track that this sat in. And while that little notch is helpful, it's unfortunately not locking the heatsink in a particular location. It's still moving left and right, and it's hard to tell, for me anyway, where the screw is in reference to where the hole is, because you can't see through this. You can't see the other side of it. So instead, I'm going to come to this other side and see if I can't line that one up instead. Don't tighten these all the way down because it'll tilt it and make it impossible. Right now it's just difficult, okay? But I can easily make it impossible if I over tighten one side before the other on this. So all I'm trying to do is feel, because I can't see, where the mount point is for that screw. Now that one is in. Now this one should automatically be at the right spot. When I start to tighten it, it should just automatically find its mount point, which it did. And now we just tighten these down to the point where they're snug. You don't over tighten these. Once the screw comes to a stop, do not try and tighten it any more than that. All we're doing is we're making sure that thermal tape is making contact, in this case with both sides of our NVMe. Don't crush your NVMe drive, and don't strip out your screws or cam out the heads. It's ridiculous and completely overkill. The amount of pressure I was talking about before is the most intense on seating your CPU. All right, let's see. I was just going to put this back in the package, but how did this go? Maybe like that. There's documentation that can go in the motherboard box, and then this would be trash. All right, CPU is in. 4 terabytes of storage is in. We have still, well, we don't need that. All of this will go in the motherboard box for warranty and future documentation. Not that we need it, but a customer might want it. And since we don't know where this system will end up, we always do it the same. Now I know this RAM works. This is our OLOy DDR5, but it's not enough RAM for a system of this caliber, but it's enough to get us through today. This is my last kit of DDR5 RGB. I finally run out. It's not a good time to buy it. A lot of RAM is sold out, and I think it's all pretty well. Except for a sale here and there, I think they're asking a lot of money for it right now. I know a lot of people think the holiday season is the best time to buy, but quite often it's the worst time to buy. A lot of prices have been raised up because they know you're buying. And you got a timeline. You better buy it, right? Because the Christmas day or the holiday is coming soon, and they're not as encouraged to give you such a good deal because they're getting the leverage. We've got what you want. So early on in Black Friday or all through November, they were eager to get your money and make some deals. As we get closer, the prices quite often go up because now they got you in a spot because you procrastinated. A lot of things are already going to be sold out, and they're not as motivated to take a loss when they have an opportunity to make extra because you waited till the last minute. So for those reasons, I will wait until after the first of the year until things settle down. There'll be a lot of returns, a lot of Amazon returns that are discounted where there's nothing wrong with anything, and a 30-day return is available on those Amazon returned products, so you can be, have peace of mind and be rest assured that if anything's wrong with the products that were returned that you just bought at a discount, you can still send them back within 30 days for free and get a full refund. So I'm going to wait and see what sort of items have been returned. Sometimes, let's say for example, somebody returned this RAM that's $200, and well, it's $169, but after tax it's like $190. Let's say after January somebody returns this and Amazon's got this returned for $100. And let's say I buy it for $100, I plug it in and it's bad. Not only can I return it for free within 30 days and get my full $100 back if it's being fulfilled by Amazon or Amazon warehouse, I could just keep the RAM, send it to G-Skill under warranty. They don't need to know that I'm not the original purchaser or that it was returned. Do not volunteer that. This is my RAM. This is my receipt. It's not working. You send it to G-Skill, which will cost you a little bit of money in postage, and they will send you a brand new kit of RAM under warranty. So even after that, say I paid $20 for postage and $100 for the RAM, that just saved me $50. I paid for it in some time and a little effort. So even when it doesn't work, it's still under warranty. If it's a really good deal, it still could be worth it to return it for manufacturer warranty. Food for thought. Lots of ways to save money besides waiting on a traditional sale. And that will be coming up here after the holidays. Throughout January up through February, items will be returned constantly to Amazon, and then you have to look for them on the product page to see if there's any returned items available and how they're discounted. Sometimes they're only discounted a few dollars, and sometimes they're discounted quite significantly. Now, because I don't know if that RAM works or not, we're going to start with some brand new RAM. And then after we get the system up and running, we can pull this RAM and try that one more time with MemTest and see if it continues to fail. If that RAM passes, I mean, first I'll be delighted I don't have to send back 2 kits. The only downside is I really wanted this to have RGB for the case it's going in, but I don't know that I want it bad enough. I think what I would do, if this works, is I'd prefer that RAM because it's 96 gigs versus 32 on a system of this scale. And then I would watch for any returns on 96 gig RGB sometime in January or February. And if I find one, swap these out and just keep it in the back of my head not to use this RAM on Z890. I don't think that's going to be the case, though. I think what's going to happen is this RAM is bad and it's still going to fail here. I've been wrong before. That's our RGB OLOy RAM. And I'm trying to think if I should put the cooler on right now. Sometimes when you put the RAM in too early, it can kind of get in your way of putting the mounting mechanisms in for the cooler. Now, we had put the all-in-one cooler on the ASUS build here on the desk, which I don't like doing because it's precarious. On the other hand, it worked really well. So I thought, well, let's do it again, until I knock something off the desk and the whole thing goes falling onto the floor and I see, $2,000 hit the floor, then I might not do it anymore. But that hasn't happened yet, so let's keep going. So here's our giant EKWB all-in-one. This is ready to just install. This is not a custom cooler. It's just a factory-sealed liquid cooler, and very, very aggressively priced for this size of a cooler that works this well to keep that chip cool. This was purchased back when I thought these chips had a cooling issue, when in fact the whole time it was a BIOS issue where the motherboards were overvolting the chip, and I wasted a lot of time and money trying to solve the problem by adding more expensive and more complicated cooling when the problem all along was the motherboard BIOS. Lesson learned. In my entire career, that's never been an issue. That was the first time we've ever seen anything like that, and it affected every motherboard manufacturer. Was defaulting to overclocked settings, overvolted settings. There wasn't a manufacturer not guilty of it. ASUS did it, ASRock did it, MSI did it, and Gigabyte did it, and they didn't give you an option where you could buy a board that didn't do it. Literally, every board they made did this, and they didn't disclose this to the consumer, and it caused all these problems that we struggled with. that we were battling the symptoms by buying coolers, but we weren't fixing the cause. So now this is probably an overkill cooler for this when it's running properly. But if you're going to overclock it, well, then the cooler's not so overkill anymore. All right. Let's get this unboxed. Anybody building anything this holiday season? Upgrading? What are you getting? Did you get a good deal on it? Have you already put it together? I know Mark Gaines said he just put his Project Zero together. He can't be alone. Come on, share your stories with us. I'd love to hear about your experiences. If you had a good experience, a bad experience, or even just a learning experience, please share it with us. Don't be embarrassed by it. All right. I've got more tape to cut. And I need a bigger desk. David Graham says he's too broke this year, but he's planning on doing something next year. Well, I get that. I hear you. I can do this, but that house in Michigan is still years away. Oh, man. Some things you just, if you want it bad enough, you just got to be patient and you got to sacrifice. And then you strike as soon as the opportunity is there. If the opportunity comes and you're not ready, you're right back into the back of the line again. Okay, let's see here. Florin says, my 13900K ran at 90 degrees Celsius with a 360 ASUS all-in-one. I had to limit its max wattage draw. Yep. Yep. Again, symptoms versus cause. Jonathan says he upgraded my 3 AMD machines to 5700 X3Ds in February, so almost a year ago. But that's a good chip. He says, so no upgrades for a while. Yeah, no, you're good for a while. Paul O'Brien said his dog is telling him it's time to go for a walk. Yeah, well, you better do that. You know, fish swim and birds fly and dogs walk. So you get that four-legged critter out there so they could check their pee mail. They usually leave it at trees and fire hydrants. Let's just hope they don't leave any attachments. Brian Rhodes said he just built a PC for a friend as a gift yesterday with no issues with all updates. Oh, you sound like a good friend to have, Brian. Tu Chen said, I'm building a 7900 XTX. Well, that's a video card. With a 14900K. Okay, there's the CPU. And he got them from Black Friday, right on. So presumably you got a good deal. This is a 13900K, not a 4. What's mine? I think mine's a 13900. I think when I got this all, I don't think the 14900s had come out yet for us. I think it's a 13900. $14900K. This is a 14900. I can't remember what I said earlier in the show. This is a 14900K. Yeah, because the 14900Ks are 400 and I think the cheapest price I can find online is Amazon at $433 plus sales tax. So after sales tax, another $40. It's just under 10%. That'll put us at about $460. It's a good chip. Once you get the BIOSes updated, they work well. Here's our instructions. Little package here. Feels like a good heavy set of instructions. EKWB makes good stuff. It's too bad they were financially irresponsible with how they Sometimes owners of smaller companies, I've seen this so many times with small businesses, they treat their business as their personal piggy bank, and they just take money out for personal reasons right out of the company's funds. And it's just not the right way to run a business, because you can't know how much you're taking versus how much you're earning to know if you're taking too much out. And the business owners that do this, they don't just do it once. They just do it on whenever they want to. And so what ends up happening is sooner or later, they end up taking more out more regularly than the company makes. And then guess where that leads to? Well, EKWB has been an expose over at Gamers Nexus if you want to learn more about the mishandling of the funds. And then Gamers Nexus recently covered NZXT and their marketing techniques that are sketchy as heck. So if you're interested in these big companies that you thought were reputable acting in an irresponsible way, be sure and check out Gamers Nexus's exposure to this stuff, because he does his research and he's got all the evidence. So in any event, this is how it's packaged. We've got our 3 fans here, we've got our radiator, and then of course hoses going to the block. So I have to figure out a way that I can set this on the desk without knocking everything over. Now, one of the things I don't like about the EKWB coolers is, are you kidding me? This tape that's there to protect the logo has ripped the logo off right onto the tape. It's no longer attached to the cooler. And what I was about to tell you is, I never quite know what orientation is this cooler supposed to be in. Is this logo supposed to go sideways? Is it supposed to face up? Is it supposed to face... Well, I guess I could put it on any direction I want now. Which way was it on there? So we have another little piece of tape here covering this, the LED light screen here, which is not a monitor, it's just LED lights. Oh, there's a lot of little protective tape around this. Let me get that taken off now before it's seated. The whole block is wrapped in this. And once we get this mounted onto the board, this will be difficult to remove. So, but yeah, that little exposed area, that's not supposed to be exposed. And that's likely my fault for having it sitting on the shelf as long as I have. If it was fresher, that probably wouldn't have happened. But this, it's like painter's tape. Painter's tape is very easy to remove unless you let it sit there for 2 years, in which case it probably going to be stuck there, at least pieces of it, and damage your walls. And in much the same way, I don't think the tape they used here was really meant to sit as long as I've had it sitting, and that's why I'm having such a difficult time tearing it off. It's really gotten bonded. They've become attached. But like just how that piece tore, that shouldn't happen. The whole thing shouldn't be that brittle. It should all just come across, come out very easily. Everything's just tearing super easy. So getting it off in one piece, I think those days passed a while back. But that's okay. I just want you to know that's not normal, and it's probably because it's been stored for a long time. What's a long time? More than 6 months, maybe between 6 and 10, let's just call it 8 months. It normally would not sit in inventory that long. So whatever time it spent in inventory before we bought it and then we put it on our inventory, who knows how long this tape was put on there, how long ago. All right, that came off in one piece. A little bit of progress. We have thermal compound pre-applied, that's why there's a plastic cover over the bottom. And so yeah, this little this little badge, if I peel that back off of here, it cracks me up. Which way did that originally go on? Now I need to look at a photo. Did it go on this way or that way or towards me or away from me? most people probably could give a rat's behind, but I want to put it back the way the manufacturer intended it. Let's see, if I look at the picture, it looks like it's going to go pointing towards me. So whether or not I agree with that, that is how it's shown in the photo. We'll seat that back down there. And then I was trying to get this plastic off of here when I got distracted. You should not be powering the stuff on with the plastic on it thinking you're keeping it protected. All you're doing is trapping the heat in there. Oh good, the whole top came off. That's actually okay, that's magnetically attached, I just forgot. That's the big light source and it's going to shine through the top. And then this, because it's a clear lens, they've protected it with the tape so it doesn't get scratched up or marked in shipping. But it also makes the lens, it makes it faded and kind of look a little blurry. So if you want the best look possible, you absolutely want to take all the tape off. The other thing tape can do is it can trap dust and dirt. It'll start to yellow, and it traps heat as well. And then the pump won't be able to have air running around it as effectively, cooling it just through airflow, because you've got the tape on there as an insulator. So for all those reasons, take the tape off, and then you'll just tape on the radiator too. All of this tape, it's going to look ugly. It's going to, oh, and I see the logo here on the radiator, definitely faces, I don't know if the camera picks that up, but just like it does in the pictures. And it's also on the, it's embedded in the plastic on the fans too. So that's why I want to make sure I get the logo on correctly. And when I mount the block, I want to make sure the block is mounted in a way that that logo faces the same as all the others. That's the kind of detail I pay attention to when I'm building, and that's the way anytime they market their products to you, all of that will align, unless they have a terrible marketing company or they did it themselves. I've seen a little bit of everything in this business, but yeah. So here's our 3 RGB fans. They typically will also have plastic right here in the middle. Sometimes there's a pull tab. You hold it in the light just right, you might find it. Where is it? I can see a little area where it's kind of coming up off the side, but I just can't tell. It sure is nice when they have the little pull tabs. Now that's not as important to remove that for any sort of heat. It's just that it will start to bubble up over time and turn yellow, and it's going to make your fans look terrible. These are all wired fans. These aren't the interconnect fans, but you know, as I mentioned, this is an older cooler. And then we have this giant radiator, which you can appreciate once I remove it from its package, already sealed with liquid in it. And then we have tape. This does have a pull tab right here on the edge. And hopefully this tape will come off a little easier. No? Kinda. And it's resistant. There it goes. I'll just put that with the rest of my tape. And again, it's just to ensure that when the package arrives, you're not receiving a scratched up product, even though it would still function fine. People will return items for that reason, right? You wouldn't want to order a new couch and have it arrive scratched or dented. So delivery companies often they'll wear white gloves, and they'll be very careful in how they bring it into your house. And then you can let your cat scratch it up into nothing and then put it out at the curb in a few years. That's the way we are. But we buy it new, we want it perfect. And that's why they do this. It's not there to annoy you. Even if it does, that's not why they did it. Should have one more over here. There we go. Okay, so the last thing in the box should be our mounting kit. That's going to include the back plates and brackets for AMD and Intel chips. We're only going to use the ones that apply to us, and the rest will be leftover. So you're always going to have leftover parts. That's normal. And that's in this box. Ooh, it's kind of heavy. I'll set that right there. Everything else in here is just foam, and I'll just close this up a little bit and get it out of our way. We'll put it right over there. Sorry. Get up, just brush it off, you'll be fine. Just put some dirt on it. It's all good. There's nobody there. I'm just trying to be funny. All right, so let's show you the size of this bad boy, right? Pretty good size here. It's definitely adequate, more than adequate for keeping our 14900K cool. Without the case out, it's hard for me to imagine how this is going to look in the case, how we're going to mount it. So for right now, we're going to keep it, I'm going to make an assumption that this is going to go in as it normally would in most cases, knowing that we may have to take the fans back off if it mounts somewhere differently than I'm imagining, because I've never worked with this case we're going to use ever before. So normally, this will come down from the top of the case with the hoses on the right, and then it'll be oriented where the hoses face the edge of the RAM. That is your normal installation method. So it'll mount up on top with the block then rotated, typically with the hoses facing the edge of the RAM. Okay, so when we keep that in mind, that means we want to put our fans down at the bottom, and we're going to blow air out through the top. Because these fans have LEDs on them, if we put the fans on top, we won't see the LEDs. The top of the case will cover them. So we're putting the fans in where we're most likely going to get that visual. We're not necessarily putting them into the best cooling position. However, whether the fans are on one side of the radiator or the other, or if they're in a push configuration versus a pull, it's a very negligible difference, maybe 1 or 2 degrees Celsius at most. That should not be differentiating whether or not your system works or not. Like if you're that close to the edge where 1 or 2 degrees makes a difference, you've got something wrong, right? Either you've got too much voltage going to the chip, you've not applied the water block correctly, or you've not applied thermal compound. You've done something wrong. That's not normal. So when we put this in here, so now that we know what we're going to put the fans on this side, then the question is, what side should the cables come out of? And we want the cables that power the fans to come out the back so we don't see them from the front. So if this is going to go in, you got to visualize this. If this is going to go in upside down, right? It's going to go in like this. If the case were facing you and the motherboard was, back by me, then these fans would go on the underside with these power cables closest to me. And that means when I turn it upside down, the fan cables point towards you. Now in theory, if this is like most cases, then all we have to do after this will be to just screw the other end of the opposite side of the radiator right into the case and we're good to go. If I'm wrong, I have to take the fans back off, but that's not a big deal anyway. But that allows us to at least get this up and running on the tech bench, as well as get it BIOS updated, because I know this is going to have a BIOS update. I'm in trouble if it doesn't. I also like how short they kept these cables. This means that one fan plugs into the fan next to it, plugs into the fan next to it, which to me pretty well hides your cabling the same as these interlocking fans do. It's so minimal, you'll never see it, and it's nothing to cable manage because there'll be no slack left over. It's a really smart design. I'm good with it personally. Now to get these fans to secure, first of all, this is the part where the brackets are, and I feel plastic. Yeah, there's a little plastic pull tab. I need a tool or something to get up under there. Maybe my razor. Wow, that tape is on good. And if I come from this side, I see the whole label wants to come off. So again, I've let it sit too long. So this side with the brackets is the side the air is coming out of, and I want the air to blow through the radiator. And I want to be able to see the RGB on the other side, so that dictates which side of the fan goes to which side of the radiator for all of those reasons. It will work in lots of different orientations, but if you want the best aesthetic look and you also want the best cooling, you sort of meet in the middle with that. You can also put fans, if you buy extras, on both sides for what we call a push-pull config, but I found that it just really adds a lot more noise and doesn't really do much in cooling by 1 or 2 or 3 degrees. So again, it shouldn't be that big of a deal. If you have that or you don't, it should be almost a negligible difference. So why add more parts at more expense that could cause more problems in the future and overcomplicate your life for no real benefit to it? Because you're not going to see them, you're only going to hear them, and it's not going to have much difference in cooling. But it will definitely cost you money. That much is guaranteed. So I've got these little dental picks here, and these might be more appropriate for getting this tape pulled up. Does not want me to get underneath it. So this whole label is coming up instead of the plastic on top of the label. And you can decide to just leave it on there. In this instance, it's going to face the back of the radiator. We're not going to see this. So the plastic isn't going to trap any heat. It can yellow and it can bubble. We're never going to see it. But what we've got is we've got a label that's coming up that has a plastic protection over it, a plastic film that's on there so good I can't seem to grab an edge of it. But it does have a little pull on it. I see the pull right here, but for some reason it's like glued itself. Now, maybe that's not a pull. Maybe that's a reflection of the light right there. Sure does look like it's a plastic pull. But I can feel the slickness of a cover on that sticker, and I know there's plastic on it, and I want that plastic off. But I also don't want to ruin it in doing so. It might be in my best interest to just leave it at this point because, you know, if I had opened this 6 months ago, this probably would have come right off. I say probably because even I don't know for sure, but this is not normal. And I can't seem to find an edge on it. You know what? There's definitely an edge on it. I think I just need my more powerful glasses. I'll get my super glasses. Yes, yes. Then all will be seen. All will be exposed. Okay. Oh, yeah, wow. Where am I feeling that edge? It was around here somewhere. Engineered in Slovenia. That's what the fan says. No. You know, maybe it's my imagination. Maybe that is just a part of this label. Well, guess what? I am finally calling it and saying we're going to leave it on there. I can't tell. But if it's staying on that good, it probably won't come off anyway. And that is, again, a side that we're not even going to see. So if that goes on, supports go towards the back, power cable, I want you to think about this now. One end of this power cable is going to plug into another fan, and then it'll either plug into power at one side, or we won't use the other side. So we have to think about where are we going to run the power cable? And we're probably going to run it, you know, from one end or the other, depending on how we can route the cable. Remember, this is the back of the board, so we shouldn't see it anyway. So if we put this fan here, I'm looking for plastic. We put this fan here. I'm trying to think about how that's going to go on. We've got to get the wire ties off of here so we have full flexibility of moving these cables so they can align with each other. So let me just show you what I'm talking about. Okay, you notice how that's fixed down into the fan and this side pops up here. Here we've got a male connector and a female connector. And here we have a female connector and a male connector. These can go together. See what I'm saying? It's only going to go in one direction. There'll be a little click. And what you're going to see here is as we mount these fans, all of this will be back. I don't know how well you can see that. All of these cables will be back against the back of the motherboard tray. You won't see any of this, and there won't be anything to cable manage because there's not enough slack here to do anything with it and nothing to tie it to. So that keeps life really easy and less complicated. So these fans that click together and they claim that, you know, they're only one cable. This is so close to that in reality that to me, either design I think is very good. I don't have an issue with either one of them. And once again, we're going to turn the fan with the brackets facing down towards the radiator. With the brackets we need, we've got a male connector here, female connector there. They're going to line up in the same orientation. We'll go ahead and click these together now. Now, in this box of parts, they're going to give us an extension cable that we can go either from that end or that end in most cases to run power that will power and give RGB to all three fans. That makes your cable management so easy. It's a shame with EKG's poor money management, EKWB, because they did such a good job in engineering and design, and the pump and cooler work really, really well. Now look how nice this is. You have a little pull tab. Just slide this out. Really nice packaging. And inside, look how well organized all that is. Oh, it keeps my OCD happy. It just tickles my OCD. All right. I need the screws so I can secure these fans down. And they got to be the big long screws here. We have to go through the fan and into the radiator. So those little shallow screws aren't going to reach. Normally, fan screws will not be threaded all the way through. If I show you these packages here, and I still have these magnifying glasses on, which is terrible. See, these screws have a long shoulder on them where there's no thread. They're just threaded right at the end. I guess I need to use this finger. Right at the end. But this bag of screws, those screws are threaded from top to bottom. I would not use it. These are likely for the mounting kit for the block, and these are for the fans. That's a little confusing. However, when the screws have a long shoulder, that means that's a whole lot less turning you're going to have to do. Easier on the wrist. All right, so those big magnifiers, oof, they'll start giving me a headache after 5 minutes. All right, let's open this bag of screws up here. We'll just spill them out. This is going to have the longer screws and the shorter screws. The shorter ones we're going to need when we're mounting the radiator to the case. The longer ones are when we're mounting a fan, because we have to go through the thickness of the fan to get to the radiator. The radiators are made of a very soft material, and they're very easy to strip out the screws, so don't over tighten these. Anytime you're screwing into a radiator, radiators are often made of a very soft metal. Even on a car or an air conditioner, what they call a coil, they're very easily stripped out, so be gentle. Now I'm just going to get them started with the electric driver. You probably should not be using an electric driver on these because it'd be very easy to cross thread and not realize it. And I just want to get these all started. I don't want to necessarily tighten them with the electric driver, but sometimes you can accidentally, if your driver's as fast as mine and you're as impatient as I am, you probably should just turn them with a manual driver. I just want to start them. I'll come back with my manual driver to make sure they're snug and not any more than snug. Where the electric driver helps me is just getting the screw seated and finding its mounting point by allowing me one hand to move the fan around a little bit and just tap on the driver, get that screw to start to bite correctly into its seat, and then just repeat another, total of 16 times, 4 screws, 12 times, 4 screws per fan times 3 fans. And then when we mount the radiator, we'll be adding the shallow screws, 12 of those. And again, be very cautious on this part. Don't be overzealous and over tighten these. Once again, if you strip out the mount point, that's on you. That's not a warranty issue. See, that felt like it went in sideways to me. Now, my screwdriver also has a clutch on it that, even if I wanted to let this go all the way to it stops, it's only on a torque level of 3, which I still feel is a little too much for these fans, but it won't break anything. Shouldn't strip anything out. But I don't want to go that far with it. I'm being overly cautious because this is a very nice cooler and a really nice system, and it deserves the greatest quality of work I can give it. Not that any other system doesn't, but even more so when there's this much money on the table and the products are of this high-end quality. So I'm just going to start to tighten down these screws here manually. You'll see there's rubber grommets on the edges of these fans. You guys may not be able to see anything, but you don't want that rubber grommet to sink in. That's there to prevent vibrational noise as the fan cranks up. And if you've got that grommet bent down, the rubber, it's ruining the rubber's ability to absorb the vibrations, negating its whole purpose. But you don't want your screws so loose that your fans fall out. So once those screws are in there snug, and if you're wondering what is snug, you'll know it when you feel it. And if you don't know it when you feel it, you'll notice the rubber grommet starting to cave in. If it even starts dipping inward, and it's not a cave yet, you've tightened it too much. It should be completely smooth, and the screw should not be jutting out. If the screw is jutting out, it's probably because you've cross-threaded it. Or it's just the angle that you're looking at it on. But they should all be seated to about the same level. See, apparently when I stopped those, there was something I had to just move past, because now they're all going in just a little bit deeper. And I want the screw more or less flush with the grommet. It's okay if it's a little above it. Like that one there. Yeah, there it goes. This one here is kind of jutting out, so we'll give it a little twist here past that point. This one's jutting out a little bit. But I can see the plastic also on the frame starting to bend inwards. And that indicates I've gone too far on the tightness. So if I run my finger over them, they should be pretty smooth. They should not feel recessed, and they should not feel as though they're sticking out like nipples. They just really want to be flat. And that should be at what we call a snug point, without being tight, without being loose. Yeah, these, for some reason, they gave me resistance early on where they were still sticking out a bit. And once we pushed past that, now they all feel smooth. It's a minor little detail that doesn't really affect anything other than what I would consider a proper secure. Securing the fans where they're not too loose, they're not too tight, and they're all more or less equally secure. So if they're all too loose or they're all too tight, that's one thing, versus
just having one screw to a completely different torque to another screw. So anyway, that's what that's going to look like. Super easy. Again, to visualize, this is going to go into the case, right? We're going to mount it with this end at the top of the case. Hose is coming down the right side. Wires are going to be in the back. And then our block now can be mounted right on top of the CPU. Now the block, of course, will has an ARGB header and a power header to power the pump. And then that's pretty much it. The radiator, all we're running a wire to are the fans, and those are the 3 cables we're going to have to hook up. One end of the other of these fans will remain disconnected because it's just another extension for you to use in the future or to ignore. So we use one end or the other to provide power, and the other end you don't attach anything to. Some people say, well, it's got a plug. Yeah, but we don't. That's for future use. Which one? We'll see depending on how it goes in. We'll make that decision. It's a judgment call. Usually the extension cables that they include will go either way. So I'm assuming what's in the box here is a cable, an extension cable that has both male and female. It doesn't. The fact that they only given us one extension cable is a bit unusual, because what that's telling us is this is a male cable. It has to go on this side of the radiator. We don't have any choice. But again, all these cables are back behind the motherboard, so whether they're coming out one side of the radiator or the other, you shouldn't be able to tell. Instinctively, I was thinking we'd be coming out of this side and that we would have either or on this cable. But no, this cable absolutely wants to connect to one side specifically. So there you are. Not rocket science. I haven't even pulled the documentation out yet. It's all pretty straightforward. Looks like my browser crashed, so let me get that back. Oh, my browser didn't crash. It was an update. Dave in St. Louis says you need a magnet dish for the screws. Well, what makes you think I don't have a magnet dish? See, people do this all the time. They make assumptions. Instead of asking, hey, do you have a magnet dish and why aren't you using it? They assume I don't have one and that I would benefit from using it. It's the exact opposite of everything you said. I do have one and I'd rather not use it. But thanks for the suggestion. All right, what else do we have? Chris Dunn said, I just built a computer for a family member who's in college, a Micro Center bundle, which was the board, RAM, and processor for $300. It was a 1700 socket. Sounds like a good deal, whatever CPU you got. Yeah, a board with RAM. What do you say it was? A board with, so you got a motherboard, the RAM, and the CPU all together for $300, and it's a socket 1700. Sounds like a good deal. All right. Let's see. Mounting kits. In this kit, we've got these, what are these called? These are like giant motherboard standoffs in a way, and they're going to secure our backplate to the motherboard. These are the thumb screws that go on top of these that secure the water block to the mount plate, and then the mount plate is right in here. This is a tool that's used to tighten these little standoffs, so you don't have to rip up your fingers. You don't want to tighten any more than you can get with this tool. Don't grab a pair of pliers and tighten it further. Whatever, as tight as you can get it with your fingers with this tool is as tight as it's meant to go. No tighter. And in here will be our brackets for both AMD and Intel mounting systems, or CPUs. Jose Lopez with a $1 super chat. Right on. Thank you, Jose. There's one bracket, two brackets, three brackets. How many brackets does it take to put in a water block? One. But do you have an Intel chip or do you have an AMD chip? So you need one for one for the other. What's the third one for? Likely because AMD continues to use the same socket over and over, only one bracket applies to AMD, and then there's probably 2 brackets that apply to Intel, depending on which Intel chip you have. And finally, there's one more bracket in here, this one. Now likely, I say likely because I'm not sure, this bracket right here, it looks different than all the others, probably goes underneath here, and it gets screwed down to the bottom of the water block. Some all-in-one pumps come with this already attached. And you need to pay attention, does it go this way with this curvature upwards, or does it go with the curvature down, well, depending on your perspective, right? And we'll have to look at the documentation, and there will be screws for this, and it will secure down. And then this, I'm going to guess, probably goes on this way. And obviously, we'll wait until we take the plastic cover off, which we don't want to expose our thermal compound until we got the motherboard ready for this. And then that will secure down here. These holes here will go through those stands I showed you, and then the thumb screws go down. It's a real easy install. So that means these are 3 motherboard brackets. This funky one is probably AMD. Sometimes it'll even say AMD etched into it from some manufacturers. This one does not. This one is for, well, it's got something etched into it. LGA 115X and 1200. So socket 1155, 1156, 1151. Those are older generation Intel chips. LGA 1200 or socket 1200, that would be your 10th and 11th gen. That's it. And this one must be what we want here. This says LGA 1700 or socket 1700. LGA is land grid array. It'd be easier if we all just picked one phrase and went with it, but that's welcome to the industry. We need this bracket, we need that bracket. We will never ever use these. We could throw them away, put them in the recycle bin, or just keep them in the box in case at some point we decide we want to change the motherboard to a different type of socket. Seems unlikely, but for each to decide. Now the only little screws I've got that could possibly affix the plate to the block look like the ones that we used for the radiator. Are they the same? One, I need 12 for the radiator and 4 for the block. So do I have 16 or do I have 12? 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Okay, so these are for the radiator. Is there anything else in here that I was missing? No? Are there little tiny screws in here? Oh, there are. In this bag right here, I think the longer screws are used for some of the AMD installs, and I don't believe that's why we're using them today. And there's some real short screws with a fat head on them. That's going to go onto this bracket to the pump. Now, again, this is all going to be in your documentation. I'm just trying to reverse engineer it here and see the logic of it, and it is quite logical and obvious at that point. So let me just set this aside. And I want to keep these screws separated because we don't need them yet, and we won't need them until we mount into the case. As a result, it'd be very easy for me to misplace these or to get them mixed up with the other screws. These are mounting screws for the block. These are mounting screws. You can't really see them because everything's in the way, but these are for the radiator and the fans. And I intend to keep them separated so I don't have to figure this out. And I can work more efficiently by pulling the right screws the first time. Instead of going, why isn't this reaching? Why are these screws too short? Why are the threads not seating correctly? So I'll just set that there for now, and now we can open up the next bag so they don't intermingle. Now in the next bag we have, as I mentioned, these 4, well, they've given us an extra. We have 5 of these, so we have 1 spare, and these are going to mount that plate to the block. So we're going to keep those right here. And these long screws, I'm not sure what they're for. Clearly this isn't for mounting the block because we're getting 12 of them. And I would think if they were for the fans, and they look like fan screws, that they wouldn't be threaded all the way through them. Like they would be just like the others with a long shoulder. But it looks like maybe you have to get through a case. You need the screw a little bit longer to mount the sandwich, the fan to the case to the radiator. And for that reason, I'm guessing that's why they're that long, but I still don't understand why they're fully threaded. But whatever, we're not using them one way or the other. It's just a curiosity. I've got another little Ziploc bag here. I've been saving these little bags just for this occasion. Yeah. I wish the bags that they put these screws in were reclosable. You saw I had to tear those bags open. And so anytime I get these little reclosable bags from other builds, I keep them for just this purpose. We likely will never use these screws, and they will continue to be included in the motherboard box as spare parts for future potential. Or we could just throw them in the trash because they're probably never going to get used. But be that as it may, in fact, since we're not using them, we'll put them over there. If we take the LGA socket 1700 bracket, you'll notice this two very different sides. One side has a plasticky cover. One side is metal. You don't want metal up against the back of your motherboard. That's dead obvious. You don't need to refer to the directions to figure out which way this goes on. One side is intentionally insulated. One side is exposed. Keep the exposed side away from the board. Then we're going to grab one of these standoffs. Now here's a problem. We have two sets of standoffs here and there's no labeling. One set is for one type of socket and one set is for another type. And they're very subtle and you can use the wrong one and do believe that you put it together correctly when in fact, by using the wrong set, you're not putting enough downward pressure or too much downward pressure, affecting the cooling ability, and you'll blame the cooler, you blame the chip when you use the wrong standoffs. The LGA socket 1200 and socket 1700 are very, very close, but they do have different pressure amounts that are required, and as a result, the manufacturers of these devices have included separate standoffs. Also, if you're doing an Intel socket 20 series, those also have separate standoffs. So let's see what's going on here because it could be one or the other. And for that, because without any labeling on these, like I know this bracket is what it is because it's got etched right into it, there's nothing etched into these and there's nothing on the package that indicates which is which, but the documentation will tell us. And I mean, they give us good documentation. That's what makes me sad about EKWB is it was nothing to do with the company's products. It was the company's upper management and leadership that sunk that ship. All right, let's take a look. Look at how well this documentation is. Now, don't be intimidated by the thickness because you'll notice there's a lot of other languages going by that's not English. The English part of this manual is right in the beginning, and that's it. These are the instructions. Is there 8 pages, 10 pages? And everything else is the same thing repeated in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 other languages. So it's 7 or 8 pages repeated 8 times in 8 different languages. So don't be intimidated by the thickness of this instruction booklet. Okay, so with regards to the standoff, one of the first things you're going to see is what's included in this kit. You're going to have this extension cable, and you're going to have this little box of parts. You're going to have a little thermal paste, right? And then next to it, it describes what it is. So it says one of these standoffs is, well, they're calling it a mounting thumb screw for Intel LGA 20XX, okay. And the other is for all of them, 115X, 1200, and 1700, and AMD AM4, and AMD AM5. That's unusual that they, and the difference is very subtle between these two. The little knurled end on one of these, I'm going to bring them up to the camera because it's a fine little detail to pay attention to. Let's go to OBS. There we go. They're very, very similar. You've got to pay attention to the detail. This knurled end right here, see how long that is? Now look at this one. This short one is used on the higher end Intel Core X processors, the Xeon processors. This is used on all your AMD and Intel sockets, with the short end going in towards the motherboard, and that long end is where your water pump is going to fit on top, and then the thumb screw is going to hold it down. So we're not going to use these, but when you see them in the box and they're separated out, they look very similar. But if you look closely at the instructions, this little knurled part here is really where you can tell the difference. You'll also see there's a height difference between them. That's another way to tell. We want the shorter one for Intel's Core X series. Again, it's a socket 20 something. They make different numbers at the end there. Those are very expensive chips. We don't normally see them. They're typically used in servers and high-end workstations, and those motherboards are quite expensive. And we're going to pull out the 4 of these, the bigger ones here. We'll never use those other ones. And of course, we have the little wrench, and the little wrench is designed that when we get this seated down into the back plate, we can rotate that, tighten it down more so than just using our fingers. Some of us have sausage fingers, and we couldn't do that even if we wanted to. This is very helpful. But I don't advise you to stick anything through that hole to get more leverage to twist it around, because you can crush the motherboard. It has multiple layers of circuitry, usually around 8 to 10. And there are multiple layers of circuits all mushed together into a big sandwich. That is your circuit board. It's not just what you see on top or underneath. There's also stuff going on in between. When we go to put this back plate on, again, we want to make sure that the plastic side with the little nipples on it is going to go towards the back of the board. So as I lift this up and I'll place that down, it shouldn't matter which orientation we put this in, if it goes right side up or upside down. There is no such thing on this type of a socket or frame. But what is important is that the little holes here line up with the holes in the board, and it doesn't look like it's going to seat in there without any assistance. So I need to kind of hold that in place. Very strange. I was expecting those little nipples would fit inside the holes, but they don't. They sit on top of them. That means I have to hold it with one hand. And notice I'm not touching any of the metal parts of the board. My fingers are on the plate and my thumb is on the I/O shield, so I don't have to worry about anti-static discharge or electrostatic discharge. So we'll just run this one through here and we'll just get it started. And I'll show you the other side here in a minute. If I do the 2 opposite corners, I shouldn't have to hold it anymore. That should automatically align the 2 remaining corners. And all I'm doing, and again, you'll see I'm handling the parts by the sides, is I'm simply putting those standoffs through the holes that surround the CPU. And then I will repeat the same with the 2 remaining. I'm calling these standoffs. They're calling them something else. And again, the short end is the end I'm starting with. Short end goes down towards the board. Now, once we have these started, I don't have to struggle with it. I can use my little tool here. And that gives me all the leverage to tighten those down so much easier, instead of using some kind of a socket and a screwdriver, which often people will over-tighten using tools like that. This prevents you from over-tightening, unless I guess you're Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I want those as tight as I can reasonably get them with my fingers. Again, too much and you'll crush the board. Now, in theory, we'll never need this tool again. Again, we're going to picture this is going to go up on top of the case. This water block, well, before I can put it on, I do have to attach the bracket, and I want to see what the instructions say with regards to which end of that bracket faces down. I do believe I've got it on properly, but I still have to take the plastic off before it will sit, and then we can secure it down with the screws. It says So our documentation is a little vague, and you can download the PDF file if you want to see what this looks like. Yes, I have the orientation correct. It doesn't matter which way we rotate it, it's just we don't want it upside down. This bracket has a little groove in it. We want the groove to face down so it kind of wraps around the standoff rather than pushes against it so that it can seat securely, which makes sense. That's why I thought it went on that way, and it appears I am correct. So that's real easy. All we need to do, and again, I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see it, but we're going to take this piece off of here. And once we remove this, we want to be very, very aware of where the thermal compound is. We don't want to bump into it. It's messy. And we don't want to contaminate it with oils from our skin or any other debris, like leaving this off where we're working could start collecting dust. And it can impair the effectiveness of the thermal compound very minorly. But again, why not just get 100% if you can, if all it means is you just do things in a specific order rather than, you know, say, I'll get this out of the way, and then it sits for 3 days, and now your thermal compound's completely exposed for too long. It'll harden, it gets contaminated with everything in the air. And then if you accidentally touch it or brush it against anything, it's messy, and you'll have to wipe it all out, clean it off, and start over again. So I'm just take one of those little screws and put one in each corner of the bracket. Again, most modern day coolers will have this bracket already attached. Not all of them. So for some, there's a little more work. Also, some coolers don't come with the thermal compound already pre-applied. Normally, you get either, I just realized, you get either the tube or the pre-applied thermal compound. EKWB has gone over and above by giving you both, but don't use both. Pick one. If you're going to use this, clean this off. I recommend you use this by default, and if for any reason this gets ruined or needs to be replaced, then go to this. But you don't have to. But you definitely don't want to mix them both. That's too much. It's like anything in life, you know. A couple of aspirin are good to get rid of a headache, but the whole bottle might be getting rid of you. Certainly can cause all kinds of internal organ damage at the very least. So a little bit helps, a lot makes it worse. I'm going to just leave this lid off. 5 quarts of oil in the car, good. 15, probably going to blow the engine. Okay, now that I've got them all started, I'm going to go ahead and tighten them down. Once again, you don't have to be a gorilla here. Just make sure they're not turning any further and don't try and push them any more than that. It's just locked down and secure. Now the tricky part for me is going to be how I'm going to do all this outside of the case, just like before. I've got to figure out my orientation. Hoses are going to go towards the RAM, which we've not seated yet, but obviously we know where the RAM sockets are. This is going to be, once it's in the case, it's going to be up above like that, so I don't want to twist up my hoses any more than necessary. We turn this direction and we seat it right onto those standoffs. Okay. So without this being secured by anything, I'm going to support it with my arm while my hand holds the block down. And with my free hand, I'm going to grab these little springy, it's a thumb screw with a spring inside of it. And we're going to seat that over one of the standoffs. And I'll just go with the one that's easiest to reach. Not too far down. We're going to trade hands here for a minute because got to be a little ambidextrous in this process. This is not the proper way to be building your system. You should go ahead and mount the radiator into the case before putting the block on. But if I did it that way, as little as you can see with the camera angle would be worse. You wouldn't see anything at all but the back of my shirt. So I do this so you guys get a better idea of what's happening and why. But it's not the way I would do it. If we weren't on camera right now, this would not be happening. Not like this. It's a much more difficult way to do things. You want to make sure that's firmly seated down, because if it's tilted at all and we tighten these thumb screws down, there may be a whole area of that CPU that's not making contact with the bottom of the cooler here. And then we're going to have heat issues. Our fans are going to run loud. You say, what's wrong? And what's wrong is you weren't paying enough attention, paying enough detail to your installation method. If you have overkill parts like this, right? We're talking about a high-end CPU, high-end motherboard, high-end cooler. These details matter much, much more. Whereas on a lesser expensive and lesser finicky bleeding edge build, you could probably get away with it and wouldn't even know you weren't making contact. You wouldn't even know. But on a build like this, it's less forgiving. So I'm going to just start tightening these down a bit more. And again, we want to try and tighten them evenly to avoid any sort of unintentional warpage that can occur that we can't possibly see. Once it's on there, we have no idea that it's sitting completely flat. So in order to increase the odds that it's completely flat, we'll go each opposite corner a little bit of a ways, and then we'll start, and we'll just keep turning, and eventually, as we go from one corner to the other, opposite corners, we'll reach a point where these won't turn anymore. It doesn't have to be precisely the same amount of turns. It can be if you want it to be. Like this one, I'm going to go ahead and just tighten it up, and then I'm going to work my way backwards now, opposite corners. And now I'm going to just, I'm so close, I'll just wait until they stop spinning, and I know they're fully seated. And at that point, they're already so well seated that I don't have to worry about them warping. Certainly if they did, it wouldn't be as severe of a warp because they were already so close to being tightened down anyway. And that's the logic behind it. And it's really not all that critical. It's pretty well, you know, as long as you're in the right ballpark, you're good enough. It doesn't, again, you don't have to count your turns, or you don't have to tighten to a specific torque. When they stop, you stop. Don't try and turn those screws any further. Now that little plastic lid that was on here, that went here like this. And now we can give this thing power and boot it up and see what it does. We are ready. Oh, I need RAM. So I put the RAM in, then I can plug power supply in. And does this have a power switch on it already? We have a power switch, so I don't have to hook one up. And I'll just put the rest of this stuff. Everything here is all extra parts now. We should have no reason for these unless we change the motherboard or we change the cooler. And even then, if we change the cooler, keeping these parts is only if we wanted to reuse the cooler in something else. Most people never do that. But you may not be most people. I know I'm not. So this is our main fan header right here. And on the motherboard, we have a pump slash fan. So this pump will plug into the pump header. Right there. Where it says CPU fan, if you want to, we could plug these into the CPU fan. I mean, technically the radiator is the CPU fan. We could also plug it into any of the system fan headers. It doesn't matter. So to keep life simple, what I'm going to do is here we've got the fan power, right? When we power one, it's powering the other two. So this controls all three fans. We'll plug that into the regular area for CPU fan. This is ARGB. This controls our lighting, and that can plug in to this ARGB, so they work together. They don't clip together or anything. They just push together. They can easily fall out. And then the one that's going to power the ARGB, the master of it, will be the motherboard. So we can just take this ARGB plug and find anywhere on this board that has ARGB. Why is this all tangled? There we go. And there is an ARGB header right here, right by me. So I'll just pop that on just for the looks. We do not have to put this on here for testing purposes unless we're testing to see if the RGB works. These cables will route away from the RAM, and thankfully the hoses are clearing all 4 RAM sockets here. I know that's a difficult angle for you guys to see. And then I'm going to open all 4 of the retention levers on the RAM modules, and we'll go ahead and seat our OLOy RAM in there now. You can see how that could have gotten into the way of our block. So skip, when you're only using 2 RAM modules, skip the first socket closest to the RAM. Start with the next one. This is pretty much universal. Now the RAM's only going to fit in one way. Make sure it aligns into the socket smoothly before you put any downward pressure on it. It should just slide right in there. And then with one corner, in the other corner, you got to exert some force. Now we're going to skip the next socket and go to the one at the far edge of the board here, closest to me. And that's going to be what we call our first channel. Now it will work with the RAM not in the dual channel mode. It just won't work as fast. And you may not even know the difference. But if you want to do it right, that's why it's done that way. All right, let me move that. Let me move that. I got a little spare little cover here we're going to keep aside, and one spare screw we'll keep aside. And we'll grab a power supply. Let's fire this bad boy up. We're a little over time, but that's okay because we're making great progress on, you know, let's face it, this is a more complex build because of the block, because of the water cooler. So these do take a little bit more time. So again, for testing purposes and demonstrative purposes, we will do this outside of the case. But if you're building at home and you're using brand new parts, there should be no reason for you to test outside of your case. If your parts are used or questionable sourcing, you may not want to mount it and then have to take it back out. All brand new parts should be fine these days. And all you're doing is you're offering up an opportunity for all kinds of damage to occur. So unless you're making a video, you're teaching a class, there's no reason to have this out in the open. You should be building right into the case. That's how I'd be doing it if I weren't making a video right now. Now I have 2 power modules here for the what we call EPS power for the CPU. One is typically labeled 1 and one is typically labeled 2. Sometimes it doesn't matter which one you use. I think, so unless we're overclocking, we only need one of them. And I'm having trouble discerning which one's which. It's always in the manual, but it's often written right on the circuit board. I just have to locate it. Okay, the one closest to me is labeled CPU power 2, and the one closest to you over there is CPU power 1. I always want to start in 1, and that means the one closest to you. It may not always be the same from one motherboard manufacturer to another, or even from the same motherboard manufacturer from one model of board to another. So don't just think, oh, I've got this figured out. No, no. If you keep changing parts, those locations can change. And as I mentioned, on many of them, it doesn't even matter. Some of them it does. So I prefer to always do it, you know, I'm always going to use number 1 first, just because I've never seen one that starts with number 2. But I have seen them where it doesn't matter, one or the other. Now we can give this power. Make sure my power supply is off. We're going to give it a keyboard and mouse because we're going to have to be able to control, you know, getting into the BIOS. And we'll plug into any of our multiple, there's a lot of USB ports on here. And I need an HDMI cable. Now, as I recall, there is no HDMI out on this high-end board. They expect you to use discrete graphics. But because it has Thunderbolt, we can go from a Thunderbolt USB Type-C to an HDMI cable. Amazon sells these for under 10 bucks. You can even plug this into your cell phone if you have USB-C on the bottom of your cell phone and run that right out to the TV. If you're staying at a hotel and you want to watch YouTube and you want the bigger screen of the hotel, you want one of these cables. And it's just one of the many reasons why I have them. Now, one of these is going to be our display port, which I think is that one. And we don't want internet yet, but I do need my HDMI cable. Okay, is it going to boot? What do you guys think? Place your bets. Dave Price says it's going to boot. Everybody's got faith. Look at all the faith. You believe in me. I just double check it. I haven't forgot any plugs. Some water blocks, for example, may have USB controls where they monitor temps and give you a little screen. And there may be an additional cable. This isn't that fancy. It's really about keeping the machine cool. It's not about giving you an entertainment device. So like the NZXT Krakens or the Trikes cooler we'll be using are as much about show as they are about cooling, and as a result, they typically don't cool as well as this one does because their focus is keeping it cool and keeping it quiet. Adding the screen is just frosting on the cake. And because of that, it's one less cable we have to run, right? There's no USB control for that. But depending on what make and model of cooler you buy, just keep in mind your wiring may be a little different. Now I'm done with the package of RAM here. This stuff here is extra. It's going to go in the box. And this, I'll just put that right over there. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you the true length of time this is going to take to boot up on the first boot because it's got to train the RAM and see what CPU we put in it. And to do that, I put this camera number 1 that I'm on in a corner here. Just drag a corner of that, and you'll see it says no signal behind me, or it will here in a minute. Move that right over there. Move it up a little bit. I activate my camera 2 input, which says no signal. That's because no signal's coming out of this. I'll flip the power supply switch to on, and for the very first time, hit the power cable. Now these fans should start spinning and lighting up, and they are. The top of the block is lighting up. That tells me everything's getting power. I can feel the cables. There should be a slight vibration in them, and that's the fluid moving in the cables. The RAM on the RGB on the RAM is lit up, so everything's getting power, everything's starting properly. Now it has to train or get to know, initialize and initiate the RAM and CPU to the BIOS so that it can adjust its timings, apply those timings, and then try and boot. And when it does that successfully, we'll get something on the screen, a logo, an error. Anything is normal with that regard. It's just something other than a blank screen or no signal. Now, I haven't touched anything. It gave us a warning the CPU has changed. We've just ignored it. It's continuing on its own here to reset, and that's normal. As you see, all the power just went out, and it's going to come back on again. You watch. There it goes. Sometimes it has to turn itself off and back on again in order for the new settings to take effect, much like you have to stop a car before you can change the flat tire on it. Now, this time, maybe we'll get a logo, maybe we'll go straight to the BIOS. I have no idea. See what happens. Please wait. Okay, that suggests to me that the Western Digital NVMe 4 terabyte drive we put in there had previously had a version of Windows on it, and it's trying to boot to it right now. Normally, I'm pretty good about erasing and resetting the NVMe drives so that there are no partitions and no formats on them. And apparently I got busy and forgot. I don't want to reuse or try to recover this copy of Windows because it wasn't set up for this chipset. And while I could do it, it's hanky and real ghetto to do that. So we want to do this professionally, and that means we're going to need a clean install. But before I do a clean install, I want to make sure I have the latest BIOS installed, and I'm sure I don't. And that's critical on these 13th and 14th gen builds. But overall, it's been critical for me as a builder since day one on this channel. I've always emphasized the importance of having the latest BIOS prior to installing Windows. Once you're done with that, it's not that important you keep it up. If it's my own personal system, I'll keep it up. But if it's going to a customer, it's pretty much done. So I'm going to turn this off. Maybe you have to hold the power button down for that to work. There it goes. And what I want to do this time is I'm going to turn it back on, but I'm going to press delete on the keyboard and get into that BIOS so I can see what BIOS version we have. So right now I'm just starting to press delete over and over. Now some motherboards may require a different, F2 or some other key, but most of the home do-it-yourself stuff is going to be a delete key. Once we're in here, we can see what BIOS version we have simply by looking right next to the camera here. It should say, let me go back to turning off camera 1 so we can see that whole BIOS. Yeah, so right here, this MS-7D27 is the make and the motherboard. Down here it says BIOS version, and the BIOS version ends in .170. Now, using the streaming computer, I'm going to come over here to my browser, and I'm going to do a Google search for Meg. No, my keyboard's not working. Wake up, Bluetooth. Meg Z690 ACE. Then I'm going to follow it with the word BIOS. You like my one finger typing? And then the end results come up here, which I can share the screen with you. Oh, I have to select the screen I want to share with you first. All right, there it is. And then I'm going to go right over here to our first option. This is taking us to MSI.com. Pay attention to where your links are leading you before you click on them. MSI.com is the right place. I'm going to click on that. And yeah, we can accept the cookies. And we're going to look here, drivers and downloads. And right here it says firmware and BIOS. The drivers are over here, utilities are over here. So under firmware and BIOS, the one on top should be the latest. 7D27 version 1J, released on October 24th of 2024. And what was the version I said I had? Do you remember? Because it should still be in here. Just to verify we've got the right board selected. It said .170, which looks like a completely different label. Has there been that many BIOS updates? Or is there a .17? There it is. So there's the BIOS we have, dated September 15th of 2022. So since then, this BIOS update came out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So the good news is you don't have to do all 12. You only need to grab the latest one. Unless it says otherwise. They may have like a disclaimer that says before you can use this BIOS update, you must at least have this version. You typically see that on AMD stuff. If you ever see it, it's still pretty rare. But otherwise, you just default to go to the latest one. Once this is downloaded, did it download already? I wasn't paying attention. No. So there's all of our previous downloads. Let's clear that because it's adding to the confusion here. Let me hit download one more time. There it goes. And then I'm going to open that and extract the files out of it. And then in the extracted files, there's usually a text file and a BIOS file. The BIOS file is physically got a larger size. The text file is like 1K and the BIOS file is like 32,000 K or 32 megs. And so what I'm going to do is copy the BIOS file out of that zip file. And I'm going to grab one of my flash drives, which I'm not sure which screen you guys are looking at right now. Yeah, you're still on the BIOS screen. So let's come back to camera 1 here. And I'm going to grab my BIOS flash drive right here. I always keep this flash drive blank for just such an occasion. And we're not on this machine, we're on the streamer. So I'm going to go plug this into the spare machine. Well, for you it would be a spare machine, right? And we could have done this ahead of time and prepped for this, but I just decided to show you live how we react to it. That's a lot of BIOS updates fixing a lot of issues. I don't want to know what those issues are and I don't want to experience them. So by putting the latest BIOS on, it ensures me I don't have to apply those BIOSes as a reaction. I'm being proactive by applying it now so I never have to suffer through whatever problems are. Those could affect me otherwise. So that's my logic on it. Now I'm going to go back over to my file explorer here and pull up that flash drive on the streamer and just paste that BIOS file right onto the flash drive. You don't have to use a flash drive that's empty. I do because when the BIOS goes to look for where the firmware is, I don't want a big listing of files. You could accidentally click the wrong one, or maybe you think, oh, it's not there, when in fact it is and you're overlooking it. This prevents mistakes. Very simple, avoidable mistakes. With that being copied, I can now take it out of the streamer. And plug it into any USB port in the back here. Not even looking. Wherever it fits is fine. Now we're going to go back over to this machine, back into the BIOS. Right here. And we'll give that a minute for the flash drive to be recognized by the machine. Sometimes you have to reboot. Most of the time you don't have to. And we're going to go to M-Flash right here. Now MSI's flash is weird. Instead of doing it through the BIOS, it wants to restart into a whole separate M-Flash mode. No other motherboard maker that I'm aware of does this. Normally we stay in the BIOS for this. But this is loading kind of a daughter to the BIOS, if you will. It's its own little bootable routine strictly for flashing. That's how they've implemented it, and that's how it works. Now, we don't turn the machine back on. It says no signal, and it's supposed to turn itself back on automatically. It should restart, and it should not be taking this long. In fact, while we're waiting, let me jump back over here to camera 1. And let me put myself in a corner so you get a better idea of what's happening over here. What should have happened right now was that machine should have come back on and started in M-Flash mode. I haven't seen this behavior before, so we're going to kick it back on and see what the heck it's doing. It's very strange. It doesn't even want to come on. It's normal. It's just like a save and exit BIOS. It should just reset and start back up again. This is a little disconcerting, but we'll turn it back on and let's just see what happens if it says, oh yeah, I was flashing and I forgot. Or does it just try and boot us to Windows again? If so, then we start over. I don't know. See what happened. That's weird. We gonna get instant flash? Or are we gonna get the toilet bowl spinning? Oh, enter flash mode. All right, now I can turn camera 1 off so we can focus on what's appearing on the screen. Now, as you can see, because that is an empty flash drive, it only sees one file on it by default. It makes our job so much easier than having to point it out and go locate it in some folder or subfolder of a folder of a folder. It's just right there on the root with nothing else to pick from. Pretty hard to screw that up. It says our BIOS version is 1J0, and down here it's telling us here's what you've got, here's where you're going, right? It verifies the host name or the model name of the board matches, because you don't want to flash a different model of board onto this. Sometimes it's a subtle difference. One board has Wi-Fi, one doesn't, and that matters. So here, this is all verified for us. And let's see, I have to go full screen because I can't see what it says. Oh, so much better. So that was just a single click. So if I double click, it'll say, are you sure you want to select this file? There's a slight delay, so be patient after your double click. Don't start quad clicking. Be patient. It says, are you sure you want to select this file? Yes. And at that point, it's hands off, right? We're going from a BIOS from 2 years ago to the latest BIOS today. And that's going to fix all those issues that people were complaining about on 13th and 14th gen CPUs. The CPU was never exposed to that other than in the moments we've been running it now, perhaps the motherboard's giving it too much voltage by default, but that's what these BIOS updates fix. And it's not something that generally will cause any harm to your CPU except over time and under intense resource usage. Even benchmarking is pretty intensive. This is all brand new CPU, brand new motherboard. So even if it's giving it a little extra voltage, it's not too much to cause any damage. There's no reason to have panic or anxiety. That's why we prioritize this particular 13th and 14th gen series. The BIOS updates are critical while you're building them. Now, obviously, if you had built it before these fixes were in place, over time, it could have damaged your CPU. It may not have, but it's possible. In which case, Intel has a 5-year warranty globally on these chips and will replace it for you. You just mail it to you get an RMA from them and you mail it in. They send you a replacement. They stand behind it 100% and have extended the warranty an extra 2 years. to give their customers peace of mind that it's going to be okay. They're not scamming you out of money. A mistake was made, we've corrected it. And so now when you're building today, you don't have to deal with that. Mistake's already been corrected. But if you're building a year ago, or you had built a year ago and you haven't done this, you absolutely should check your motherboard. If you have a 12, 13, or 14th gen Intel chip, check your motherboard. Even if it's Dell or HP, check to see if there's a firmware update. And you'll find that in the support section. So if it's Dell or HP or whoever, it's in their support section for that model of computer you bought. If you built your own computer, it's in the support section of the motherboard, just like I showed you where we found our BIOS. That's the same for MSI as it is for ASRock, Asus, and Gigabyte. Now, if you sourced your board from some company you can't pronounce out of AliExpress, don't expect any support, don't expect any warranty. But hey, you got a good price on it. Now, as you can see, this can take a while. Leave it alone. Don't interrupt it. Don't mash on the keyboard. Don't move the mouse around. Just walk away. Let it do what it needs to do. It may reboot and you think it's done. When it's not done yet, leave it alone. You're going to know when it's done because it's either going to take us back to the BIOS, give us another error message, or try and boot back into Windows. Otherwise, it's still working. So this first power off that we see here, that's occurring right now, it's turned itself back on again, and it's going to now complete the BIOS update if it's not already done. And the only way to know is to wait and see what it does next. There's no excuse to start pressing on any keys or moving the mouse or to interrupt this process unless you're a glutton for punishment and you want to damage your motherboard. Just so you know, there's some serious consequences to interrupting this. Otherwise, it's a real safe process if you leave it alone. That's all I'm trying to tell you. If it fails, it's likely because you interrupted it. You did something. If you want it to succeed, leave it alone. Let it do its job. It still says no signal, so it's still processing something. Don't overreact. It's working. Leave it alone. It will boot. Now, if it sits on no signal or not responding after about 10 minutes, you might have an issue on your hands. But it's not even been 10 minutes since we started. So it might feel like it's been 10 minutes. Pay attention to the clock so you can accurately assess whether or not you're overreacting. As you can see, it's rebooted several times now. This is now its third restart. And now we're getting the little toilet bowl flushing. That's what I call that symbol. And it's booting into Windows this time, which is a previous install that is self-healed. How crazy is that? I don't trust this Windows install to have two sets of drivers from two different motherboards, but it's impressive that started because I have no idea what this was in before. But if I right-click on the system properties, we should see everything correctly with regards to our Core i9-14900K, our 32 gigs of RAM, some of which is being used by our onboard graphics chip. We're running Windows 11 Pro 23H2, not 24H2. And I'll bet you, well, I don't know. I better not bet you. But if I plug the internet into this, I wonder if the network drivers are already loaded here. And that sound is a wire hitting a fan as I was twisting the motherboard trying to find my network port. Okay, plug the network port in. I'm going to remove the flash drive. We're done with it. And I'll erase the file off of it. We'll never need that file again unless I have another one of these motherboards that's been sitting in a box for 6 months. What I'm waiting for is to see if that globe became a screen, and it just did. So the drivers are there, but I bet we're missing a bunch of drivers. If I right-click and go to the device manager, yeah, we've got a bunch of stuff missing here. So I just prefer to do a clean install, but just out of pure curiosity, I wonder what happens if I go check for Windows updates. Anyway, that's the build. That's the most basic foundation. The next part of this, get my camera back. The next part of this is to put everything into the case. That means we're going to need a power supply. I'm not using this power supply. I've got a 1,000-watt modular power supply from Asus that'll go in this board with this cooler. Once all of that's in place, then we can start benchmarking, Cinebench R23. We can benchmark the speed of the drive, should be about 7,200 or so megabytes per second. If everything's working right, we want to be in the right area of performance and cooling. And if all that's good, then it's cable management time and throw the cover back onto it. If somebody wants to add a GPU to this build, I mean, that's what it's intended for, but we don't have to use one with this adapter cable. We can use onboard video. I think when you're buying a $600 motherboard, the thought process is you're probably going to be pairing that with a $1,500 to $2,500 GPU. That makes sense. So why give you the port? On the other hand, the port doesn't cost that much to add. I wish they would have given it to us at this price. Nonetheless, the adapter, the USB-C to HDMI, Thunderbolt adapter there, or even USB 4 adapter, gives us video output, as you can clearly see, using the onboard graphics of our CPU. If a CPU ends in the letter F as in Frank, that means it has no onboard video. So if we were to put that into this system, or any system, we would absolutely have to have a graphics card. No option. We'd have to have one, or we're not going to ever get any video out of it. Even if it has an HDMI port, it won't work with an F series CPU. Those CPUs cost less because they don't have a GPU built in, but those GPUs are not as powerful as an external, and the external GPUs can cost 4 times more than your CPU. So if you're a gamer or you're somebody that needs that excessive discrete graphics power, you have that option here, and it's really designed for that. One of the things I didn't show you was underneath the heat sinks, there's room for more M.2 drives if we want to add more. And this is just a couple generations behind the Asus Z890 Creator ProArt. That's because we've gone from what is essentially a 13th gen motherboard, which is a Z690, to the 14th gen motherboards that are Z790s, to what are now the 15th gen Intel chips that are now the 890s. So we're technically 2 generations behind on the board, 1 generation behind on the CPU, and this board will support 3 generations of CPU, 12, 13, and 14 equally, with no modification. It doesn't make any sense to buy a high-end board and then put an older low-end CPU in it. So I do try to keep things balanced in that way. It doesn't make sense to spend $100 for this and $1 for that if they're going to go together and work together. Things should be more or less balanced. Doesn't have to be exact, but more or less. Now, it is downloading updates, and I mean a lot of them. Wow. It'll probably be faster for me to just, first of all, it's going to be a cleaner install to just install 24H2 than upgrade and leave all the external files, and the upgrade process is a little messy. A clean install is always better. And for me, on a brand new build, anything less is unacceptable. The benefit of the upgrade from 23H2 to 24H2 is you don't lose any programs or data. But since it's a brand new build, it doesn't have any programs or data, and this process will take longer and leave a bigger mess than if we just did a clean install with 24H2. This should not have booted into anything. If I did my job, I would have had that drive wiped clean, so we would have never even had this opportunity to even wonder what if. It should have just been just like a brand new drive, forcing us to have to install clean. So we're going to do that anyway. We don't have to be forced into doing the right thing. We do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. You might think, well, I don't have to do that. It's already done. I'm telling you, it's not a good way to start off a new build, is to just say close enough. Not any build, let alone one of this price point. So there you go. Let me just take a look here in the chat room and see what you guys are saying. I've been sort of focused on getting this done, and we've been running long now for the last couple days, just trying to get this work done. But I've been just enjoying myself and enjoy hanging out with you guys, and I'm, again, balancing what I'm doing here with what's over there. Sometimes I spend more time over there than I spend here. Today I spent more time here than I did over there, and I'm trying to correct for that a little bit right now before we wrap it up. I'm going to go full screen on camera 1 now because you don't need to see Windows updates running. And let's see, if you have any comments or questions, I've not been looking, so please ask them again now, and I'll do my best to address them. Andy wants to know, who's this build for? It's not for anybody. This is a channel build designed for, its sole purpose to build is to educate and to inspire our viewers, to let you know what's possible, how it goes together, how is this different from an ordinary build, what makes this worth building compared to what we've built in the past. At this time, it has no purpose other than educational demonstration. That's it. My goal is it will find a home, whether I use it myself or I end up selling it locally. Otherwise, the reason it hasn't been done is because there's been no customer who ordered it. So it could wait indefinitely until I felt like I was in the mood or I had the time. I don't have that luxury when working with customers, not if I want to keep them. So that's why this build has taken so long for me to get to, because there was nobody pressuring me to get it done. And as I'm trying to get caught up with a backlog, this has been sitting for over 6 months waiting for me to get to it, but without any home for it to go to, without it serving any purpose once it's done, there's no priority for me to push it through if I have other pressing matters. And that's how we got here. I still have one more. I have the Z690 Unify, which is just one level lower than this, but I don't have a CPU for it yet. I'm going to wait till after the holidays and see what gets returned and see if I can't find a good deal. That also has been sitting for 6 months. It ain't going nowhere. It doesn't have a home either. It's going to need a BIOS update for sure. And we'll revisit or visit that. And it's not a revisit, but we'll be visiting that in the new year. Or if something changes that solves my CPU absence, we'll do it sooner than that. But it's nothing I need to spend money on today. Barry Klein says, this serves no purpose other than to make me want to spend money unnecessarily. I couldn't have said it better. Look, there is a legitimate reason to have a system of this caliber, and they are available. You don't need to buy something lower and overclock it and spend a lot of money on cooling and spend a lot of money on fans and then experiment with your BIOS when you can just get it this fast out of the box with adequate cooling. We don't need to overclock it. 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Pick your poison. People that usually buy systems like this in a professional purpose, they need it to do something reliably. They don't want to lose all their work because they got 12% faster. So you just crashed and lost everything you worked on. That doesn't sound like it's faster to me. That sounds the opposite of faster. If you start over again, slower would be faster. So if you buy a chip and you run it the way it's designed to run without overclocking it, your statistical likelihood of crashing or having random blue screens or frustrations significantly goes down. Run it the way the engineers intended and you're going to have a better overall computing experience. When Mitch brought his system over, he had left it alone. That's why it ran so great. And he didn't even need to upgrade it. I twisted his arm a little bit. I said, hey, it's old. He's like, but it's nothing wrong with it. I go, yeah, something to do. Let's upgrade it. The system I showed you the other day was 10 years old. It had never been opened, not even for dusting. These are your most reliable systems. When people get in there and they won't leave stuff alone, it's just a matter of time. Sometimes it's a matter of seconds before they take something that's working and they break it because they were trying to make it better. They have the best of intentions, but they end up having the opposite effect of what they were trying to do. And then I'm not complaining. I've made a lot of money from fixing these voluntarily unnecessary expenditures to damage something that wasn't broken and trying to make it better than it was, and then they end up making it not work at all. So just understand the risk you're taking and if it's worth that risk, not only of money and of time, but of something simple. All I was doing was changing my thermal compound. Why were you changing your thermal compound? Was your system overheating? No, I saw a video that said you should change it after a few years, and I thought my system would run a little cooler. Okay, but was it overheating? No, but I thought it could run a little cooler. Well, who cares? It's going to run exactly the same. You know, in your car, when you drive at 2,000 RPM, you could be doing 30 miles an hour, or you could be doing 90 miles an hour. That's what the transmission's for, right? The engine's not working any harder. Engine's still moving 2,000 RPM. So, you know, gears are pretty crazy things. When people think they're going to do something simple and they end up causing damage they never intended to cause, to fix a problem that was never a problem, and to spend money they didn't need to spend and have additional money to repair it, and then the inconvenience of being without it, when if they would have left it alone, it'd still be running fine today. I think that's an important consideration to take before you undertake any unnecessary upgrades to a perfectly good working system. On the other hand, if your system is having a problem, hey, the fans are running too loud, hey, it's starting to overheat, join us here in the chat and get a little free advice on how to resolve that in the most cost-effective and secure way to avoid any damage. Or search Reddit and just go to random strangers for advice and see where that leads you. Either way, you're always welcome to come in here at any time and ask for a little assistance on the best approach to resolve the problem. Sometimes people may come in and ask for the best approach on how to accomplish something, like how do I change the thermal paste? And that's where we've got to back you up and say, wait, what makes you think you need to change your thermal paste? Because what you're doing may be completely the opposite of getting the problem solved. Why are you doing it? We need to know why. What's the problem? Let's start there. Don't ask us how to apply the solution. That may not be the solution. So let's not waste your time. Let's not waste our time. Explain to us, what is the problem you're having? What is the end result you're looking for? And we will gladly and happily, gently guide you to that solution that is the most cost-effective and more than likely the right solution that can save you that learning curve of, oh, I didn't need to do all that because it had no impact and I almost broke my system, right? But you know, it's your choice. I just want you to make an informed decision. We're here for you. It's up to you whether or not you want to take advantage of the very, very knowledgeable people here, as well as myself, that are offering this advice to you for free from a trusted source versus, you know, some stranger on Reddit. What you got?
You have an email and a wonderful card.
We have a Christmas card from my family.
Planet Cryos.
Oh, can I, is it public?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I would be a little, I wanna.
Well, let me see it. Watch your step. Thank you. The Planet Cryos family. I see. It's just everybody's names you're saying?
It's a great card.
Merry Christmas, Carey and Marlena. I'm sending warm holiday greetings from our home to yours. May your season be merry bright. Merry and bright. And that's from our friend Planet Cryos and his family.
Yeah, how great is that?
That's very thoughtful. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Planet Cryos.
Buck DTCH. I don't know what that says. 10 Australian dollars. Oh, he's Australian. Maybe that means something in Australian slang. Hey, Carey, he says, long-time watcher. I built many PCs for myself, friends, and family. I still love watching just because I enjoy the build experience so much. Thank you for the free entertainment. Well, don't thank me. Thank all of our generous members and subscribers here that have made all of this possible. We don't have traditional sponsorships here. Really, we don't have any sponsorships. So, well, we do have some endorsements. They're not sponsorships. And it's contributions like yours and from our members that make these videos possible. And the level of build and the frequency of builds we do is based on how much financial funding we have to do it. Unfortunately, we cannot rely on YouTube any longer for advertising revenues. They're 90% down from where they were 2 years ago. So for every $10 I made 2 years ago, I now make $1. That's rough. So thanks to you guys, I don't have to turn into a corporate spokesperson. And thank you so much for being a part of this community and being a watcher for so long and really getting what I'm doing here. Not everybody gets it. My videos are too long. I don't make commercials. They want to see commercials. We don't make those here. Not everybody gets that. That guy gets it. And thank you so much for supporting the channel and for your kind words. Mortant said he's got board envy. I don't need it, but my next build's going to be an AMD, he says. AMD's got a couple chips coming out. Going to make that 9800X3D look far less desirable. You watch, just a few weeks away. Mark Gaines said, I resent an Amazon gift card to the other email. Oh, and Mark Gaines contributes £5 in that super chat. Let's check the phone again. But yeah, we're going to do a wipe and a reinstall. I'm letting the updates update just because I'm ignoring it. I'll get back to that after we're off camera. We'll erase the partitions, reinstall Windows, redo the updates and drivers. So when you see this again, that part will be done. And that way we can go ahead and mount it into the case and finish the build. It's a really nice build. And it's got just enough RGB. I feel like, you know, it's not a Las Vegas marquee. It's still classy with a little bit of flash. There it is. Mark Gaines sent an Amazon gift card. Wow, $100. That's very generous. Thank you so much, Mark, for your continued support. The generosity in this community is, I'm speechless. I can't thank you guys enough for that. As I mentioned, we're not really buying anything off Amazon right now. I feel like the prices are too high and the shipping's too long because everybody's buying their last minute gifts. But come January, towards the middle or end of January, I should start seeing a lot of Amazon warehouse items at discounted prices. I try and make these contributions go as far as I can with as much content that I genuinely want to make that isn't just repeats of content. Now, granted, we've already done a board like this, but we didn't use this cooler, we're not using this case, and the power supply we've never used before. So even when we're redoing what feels like a repeat, it's always a little something different. And that's even second choice. Like, I wouldn't necessarily do that on purpose, but these boards were so cheap. I had to buy it. If I go to the convenience store and they have a medium soda for $1 and a 55-gallon barrel drum for $1.05, I'm walking out of there with the drum. Brad Vandermeal, I want to thank you again for your $5 PayPal contribution, and of course to our friend Frankie B with his very generous PayPal contribution. And Frankie had said, there's a little something to help you get whatever you need to do more videos. Well, again, I think we're good for the rest of December. Everything's just too pricey. Unless I catch something on sale, we have that Galaxy Book 4 Edge arriving hopefully sometime tomorrow. And then Friday, maybe I review that Snapdragon because it's different. It's not a Chromebook and it's not a Mac, but it's also not a typical Windows PC. It's somewhere between them. Just like the Mac can't run all the Windows software, just like a Chromebook can't really run any Windows software. It's its own little ecosystem. And so I'm going to demonstrate to you and myself, because I've never used one, what you can expect from it. And things like system utilities, like CPU-Z, Crystal Disk Spark, probably won't work on it without a special rewritten version of that software for ARM. Microsoft recently released a version of Windows for ARM, but that means you need drivers for ARM, and every piece of software you load either has to be written for ARM or emulated so ARM can understand it. And system utilities or like CyberLink Power Director, they're not going to work, not unless they're rewritten for ARM. It can't do everything a regular laptop can do. Maybe someday, or maybe they just never sell enough to make it worthwhile for these companies to offer that option. So we're a little early on this. The benefit is you can get an all-day battery life. And as long as I can use my remote software on it for 6 or 8 hours without having to plug it in, that's all I need it to do. That's the sole well, there's 2 reasons. 3 reasons. 1, it was $200 off its regular price. 2, I want to review it and let you guys know what to expect if you're thinking of one, because this may not be what you think it is. And 3, for my own business use, I'd like to have something that I can go all day without having to plug it in. And I'm not going to plan on editing videos on it. I don't really plan on using it for any other purpose than maybe emails, Facebook, social media, right? Using a browser, which a Chromebook could do that. And then, of course, my remote access software, being able to run instant house call and connect to my clients and be able to connect to the, 10 or 12 different PCs over the course of the next 3 or 4 or 5 hours to do whatever updates are needed. This usually happens at night, around the weekends when people are not in the office. I can run all the Windows updates, clean up all the temp files, run the scan for viruses. These things take hours, and as one machine's processing, I log into the next one, work on that, and before you know it, 4 or 5 hours has gone by, and I've already had to plug my laptop in that I've got now for that after about 3.5 hours. So I don't need that much more battery life, but nobody's ever complained their battery lasts too long. I've never heard that complaint. So if the rumors are true and you can get up to 23 hours of battery life out of it, which I'm very skeptical of, as long as I get 8 or 9 hours out of it, heck, if I got 7 hours out of it, I'm good. I don't anticipate I would ever be using it that long. I only want to plug it in when I'm done with it. So again, thank you to Frankie B and Paul Gray, who watches us in Australia. He's given us a Amazon gift card every day this week. Very generous man. Thank you so, so much. Our good friend Buster, he has helped us out so much. I can't say enough about how lucky we are to, for me personally, to call him a real friend. Like, if we travel, one purpose for us going to Scotland is to meet this man in person. He's somebody I really want to meet in real life. Also, you know, we've got Oystein in Norway. I would love to go to Norway. Great excuse. And if I'm there, I'll be knocking on his door. So don't be contributing if you don't expect me to show up one day. But all of the members, especially you guys that have been members for 31 months, is insane that you guys have stuck with me since the beginning. That is so flattering and so special, because I was very nervous about turning memberships on. I was afraid it was going to turn off a lot of people. And for people to have my back and support me, you know, I wouldn't have done it unless, well, you should know, unless I absolutely had to. And that's where we reached, unfortunately. But without you guys, these videos wouldn't exist. So for everybody that gets to enjoy the content just for free, understand that it's getting paid for by other viewers. And I hope you appreciate them as much as I do. But we do the videos for all of you, just to the limits of our financial means. That's going to, I think, wrap it up for today. I hear you opening up boxes over there. Do we have something?
Yes, I think you're going to be excited.
Oh, gimme. So yesterday when we were doing our Thermaltake build, I was going to put the cooler in before I realized the cooler hadn't arrived. So this will go into that yellow build we did yesterday. Fresh from the Amazon truck is the Thermaltake TH240 V2 Ultra EX. Just rolls right off the tongue. And we're also waiting on a little LCD screen that's the same shape and size as this that goes on the case. That's not expected to arrive until the 20th, so we have another week and a half. And I'll likely do them both at the same time. So for now, this will get set aside off camera, but we are making some progress here finally. This was ordered quite a while ago, and it's taken much longer to arrive than we expected. I should have been able to put that in yesterday, but that's okay. It's another project that's not going to a customer, so there's no timeline on it. Just out of curiosity, I just want to see how our updates are doing, even though I'm going to wipe the drive out, it doesn't matter. Oh, it's waiting on a restart. That's fine. We'll restart it. I want to thank Planet Cryos again for his friendship and his kindness. He's really been helpful to our channel. He sent us that motherboard for the 11th gen that was sent to us by another viewer that they found in a trash can. What, an 11600K? Some just threw it away. Well, here, Carey, you could probably use it before I will. Couldn't find a motherboard for a reasonable price. Planet Cryos goes, I got an extra one. I'll send it to you. Goes through the trouble of packing it. It's practically like brand new, and it's not a cheap board. And it worked beautifully. We've got the system sitting right over here. Basically free computer, right? We just one part from one viewer, another part from another viewer, some Amazon gift card money for a case and power supply. We're good to go, right? I can't thank you guys enough for how incredible that is. Just have to figure out how to sell these systems where I don't have to ship them, and then I can take that money and put it right back into more content. So that's another bridge for me to cross. But that 11600K is nothing to sneeze at. That's a very respectably powerful system, even compared to this. I mean, depending on what you're doing with it, you may not even be able to fully utilize all the power that has, let alone this, depending on how you use it. And of course, that holiday card is a nice touch. We often see holiday cards from our friends, and we like to share them with the audience. I know our friend Colin Hilton had sent us one to the old studio, and we never got it. But we certainly appreciate the thought that counts. And of course, something else. Oh, the capture card that we got from Colin Hilton, we haven't given up on that. We're still working on upgrading at least one camera to 4K just to see. And so that should hopefully happen before the holiday. I just have to have some time for it. I think I got everybody. Probably didn't. To each and every one of you, thank you so much for hanging out. Thanks for joining us on the video. Yesterday, sharing a story with our friend Richard Claiborne. We thank him for enabling us to share his build with you guys and some of the build frustrations so we can all learn from that together. And super nice guy. And if you see him in the chat, always be sure and say hello to him. Also, I want to say thank you to our friends over at SCD Keys, Acronis, and RoboForm, who continue to offer their discounts to you guys in the links below our video. And if you're looking for a discounted Windows or Office key, it's a fraction of what Microsoft's suggested retail price is, like 90% off. Guaranteed to work with support, and I stand behind it personally. Same is true with RoboForm, that's 30% off for all new customers, and Acronis is 30% off for everybody all the time using our discount codes in the links below. These are products I endorse. I wouldn't call them sponsors. They're endorsements. There's a difference. I stand behind these products, I use these products, and I am free to speak my mind for better or for worse about these products. And because they're stellar, in my opinion, in my needs and my business, I reached out to them and said, would you work with us? I also reached out to others. And the reason you don't see the others is because they would not meet our terms. Even though I like their products, they won't offer you guys any better discount than they offer everybody else on any other YouTube channel or vlog. And I said, well, never mind. If you won't do anything special for us, for our audience, then what's the point? They can go get that discount anywhere. And even that didn't change their minds. But the people who saw the value in that, Acronis, RoboForm, and SCD Keys, I hope you appreciate it, because those deals were quite unusual. Most content creators are like, how much money will you pay me, right? And I'm saying, how much money are you going to save our viewers? And when they won't budge and they say they're all the same, then having a good product that I like isn't good enough for me to come out here and endorse it. Just so you know, that's what's going on behind the scenes. And that's what makes Acronis and RoboForm and SCD Keys so much better than the rest. So if you're interested in backup software, password management, or you need a Windows or Office license key that's legal, legit, and supported, you can trust our links, you can have peace of mind. And if you have any issues with them, you can reach out to us directly. One more time, I'll put the email address on the bottom of the screen and we're going to wrap it up. And that email address is right there. And feel free to reach out anytime, showcasecreate@gmail.com. If you haven't received a response from us within 24 hours, we never got your message. Do double check your spelling, maybe try sending it again. And if that still doesn't work, try and get my attention in a live chat, because we're not intentionally ignoring anybody. Okay, thank you again for hanging out. We will be back again live tomorrow at the regular starting time, 1 o'clock Phoenix time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And I hope you'll join us in the chat room then. Until next time, oh, and thanks to Mara for all the work she does on our thumbnails and video descriptions. Shame on me. Got to get all those thank yous out there. This is a team effort. I'll see you all again tomorrow. Until next time, bye for now.